Welcome to the Crime for Sleep channel. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Story 1. I remember the evening clearly, though sometimes I wish I didn't. The rain was gentle against my windows, creating that soft white noise that makes you feel safe, contained within your own warm bubble as the world outside grows dark and wet. I had been sorting through cardboard boxes in my attic, the kind of mindless activity that fills empty Sunday afternoons when you live alone in a house too big for one person. The box was labeled electronics in my ex-husband's hurried scrawl. We had divided everything so meticulously when he left 3 years ago that finding something he'd missed felt strange, like discovering a ghost had left evidence behind. Inside, beneath tangles of outdated chargers and a digital camera with a cracked screen, I found it, an old baby monitor. White plastic, slightly yellowed with age, its antenna bent at an awkward angle. I turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight of it cool and substantial. We had never had children. It was one of the fault lines that eventually split our marriage apart. I figured he must have bought it optimistically during those early years when we still talked about when, not if. The layer of dust coating it suggested it had never been used, just purchased and forgotten. I placed it on my bedside table that night, intending to throw it away in the morning, a relic of a future that never happened. Some small part of me couldn't help but wonder what it would have been like to hear a child's soft breathing through its speakers, to watch over someone who needed me. 3 nights later, I woke to a blue glow in my darkened bedroom, the kind of light that feels intrusive at 3:17 a.m. when the world should be black and silent. The monitor's screen had come to life. The power light glowed steadily, though I knew it wasn't plugged in. I hadn't even checked if it still worked. On the small screen, illuminated in grainy black and white, was a nursery. A crib with wooden slats cast thin shadows against a wall decorated with what looked like clouds or stars. It was difficult to make out clearly through the static. A mobile hung above, perfectly still. I sat up slowly, sleep falling away like water dripping from my skin. The room on the screen wasn't mine. There was no nursery in my house, no room converted or prepared for a child that never came. Yet the image remained steady and clear, as if broadcasting from somewhere just beyond my understanding. I picked up the monitor with trembling fingers, examining it more closely. No power cord, no batteries inserted in the compartment at the back. Just an unplugged, unpowered device showing me a room that didn't exist. I nearly dropped it when I saw movement on the screen. Something shifted at the edge of the crib, a shadow darker than the surrounding darkness. It moved with purpose, leaning slightly over the railing. I couldn't make out features, just a presence, hovering where no one should be. The logical part of my brain, the part that pays taxes and remembers to buy milk, told me this was impossible. Electronic interference, perhaps, an old device picking up signals from a neighbor's monitor, but I knew no families with infants lived on my street. The closest house was a quarter-mile away, an elderly couple who had lived there since I was a child myself. I should have turned it off, should have removed whatever phantom power source was feeding it and thrown it away immediately. Instead, I watched, my breath shallow, as the figure by the crib moved again. A hand, at least, it looked like a hand, reached down into the crib. I found myself leaning closer, straining to see what was in the crib. Was there a baby? Was this some kind of bizarre crossed signal, allowing me to witness a moment of tender parenting from miles away, but the angle never shifted to reveal more. The next morning, sunlight normalized everything. I examined the monitor in daylight, finding it exactly as I'd expected, dead, silent, ordinary plastic. No mysterious power source, no haunting images. I convinced myself it had been a vivid dream, the kind that comes from sleeping in a strange position or eating too close to bedtime. I put the monitor in a drawer and tried to forget about it. 3 days passed before it happened again. This time I was reading in bed when the blue glow began, casting strange shadows across my ceiling. The same nursery appeared on screen, the same crib, but something was different. The mobile above the crib was turning slowly, though there was no breeze visible, no hand reaching to spin it. I watched, unable to look away, as the shadows in the room seemed to lengthen and contract. The figure appeared again, this time more substantial. Standing at the foot of the crib, looking down, I could almost make out the slope of shoulders, the suggestion of a head tilted in contemplation. "Hello," I whispered to the monitor, feeling foolish immediately afterward. Of course, there was no microphone, no way for my voice to travel through whatever impossible connection had been established. But the figure paused, as if listening. That's when I noticed something else, a small date stamp in the corner of the screen. The kind security cameras sometimes display. It read 5/14/1994. My breath caught in my throat. That was exactly 1 month before I was born. I began researching the previous owners of my house the next day. It had been built in the 1980s, and records showed a young couple had lived here first, the Mercers. They had moved away suddenly in mid-1994, selling the house at a loss. No reason was given in any of the real estate documents. The local historical society kept digital archives of the town newspaper. It took hours of scrolling through mundane reports of council meetings and high school basketball scores before I found it, a small article dated June 20, 1994. Local couple leaves town after tragedy. Sarah and James Mercer have decided to leave Pinewood following the disappearance of their infant daughter last month. Baby Eliza, only 4 months old, vanished from her crib on the night of May 13th. Despite extensive searches, no trace of the child has been found. Police have no leads at this time. That night I placed the monitor on my bedside table again. I waited, watching until the blue glow finally came. The same room, the same crib. This time I noticed details I'd missed before, a small stuffed rabbit in the corner of the crib, a rocking chair just visible at the edge of the frame. The figure appeared again, and this time it seemed to be looking directly at the camera, directly at me, across 30 years and whatever impossible boundary separated us. It raised one hand, almost like a greeting or a warning. Then it reached into the crib and lifted something out, something small, bundled in a blanket. The baby. I watched, paralyzed, as the figure moved toward the nursery door, baby in arms, and disappeared from view. The screen went black. The monitor never turned on again. I've often wondered what I witnessed through that impossible window. Was it a recording of what happened that night in 1994? Was I somehow seeing the actual event, preserved like an insect in amber? Or was it something else, a loop of tragedy playing over and over, waiting for someone to notice? I still live in the same house. Sometimes in the room that must have been the nursery, my home office now, I think I hear the soft sound of a mobile turning, though there's nothing hanging from my ceiling. Just the whisper of tiny mechanisms, the ghost of motion preserved in air and memory. The police never found baby Eliza. The case remains open but inactive, one of those mysteries that eventually fades from community memory. But I know what happened to her, or at least I know what the monitor wanted me to see. I never told anyone this story. Who would believe that an unplugged baby monitor showed me a 30-year-old abduction? That somehow The walls of my house remembered what happened here long before I arrived. Sometimes I wonder if the monitor was trying to warn me about something. Other times I think it was simply a witness compelled to share its testimony with someone who would listen. Either way, I keep the drawer locked where I put it. Some things once seen can never be unseen, even through the static-filled screen of an impossible connection. And sometimes, late at night when the rain taps against my windows, I wonder if somewhere in some other house, another person is finding an old electronic device that will show them my life, my secrets, my own private tragedies playing out in blue-lit silence. Story 2, they said the house had been empty for years, but when she toured the basement, she noticed long scratch marks along the inside of the door, deep, recent, and frantic. And beneath them, a name carved into the wood, her name. The file landed on my desk on a Tuesday morning, one of those crisp October days where the sunlight slants through dusty blinds in perfect golden bars across your office. I remember the weight of the manila folder as I picked it up, unremarkable, yet somehow heavier than it should have been, like it knew the gravity of what was inside. "You might want to take a look at this one," Captain Morris had said, his voice carrying that particular tone he reserves for cases that will keep me up at night. Real estate agent found something strange in the Willoughby house. I sipped my coffee, letting the bitter warmth spread through me before opening the folder. The Willoughby house. Even the name carried a quiet weight in our small town. 3 bedrooms, Victorian trim, sitting empty for nearly 7 years since old man Willoughby passed. No heirs came forward. No buyers showed interest. Just a decaying structure on Maple Street that seemed to sink further into itself with each passing season. The first photograph in the file showed the exterior, peeling paint, overgrown garden, windows that reflected nothing but emptiness. Standard documentation, but it was the second image that made me set my coffee down slowly, deliberately. A basement door wooden painted a faded green decades ago, and across its surface a series of long, deep gouges, scratch marks, 4 distinct lines, then another set below, someone trying to get out, or something trying to get in. The third photograph zoomed in on the lower portion of the door, carved into the wood, crude but unmistakable, Eleanor, the name of the real estate agent who had made the discovery. Eleanor Price, Coldwell banker, according to the business card paperclip to the report. I spent the morning reviewing the preliminary findings. The house had been locked up tight, all entrances secured, all windows latched from inside. The real estate company had only received the keys 3 days prior, when the county finally processed the paperwork to list the abandoned property. The dust on the floors was undisturbed except for Eleanor's footprints and those of the responding officer. At noon, I drove to Maple Street. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined, respectable, the kind where people notice things. I parked across from the Willoughby house and just watched for a while, letting my eyes trace its outline against the autumn sky. Houses have personalities if you look long enough. This one seemed to be holding its breath. Mrs. Landry from next door noticed me eventually. She approached my car with the caution of someone who has lived long enough to be suspicious of unmarked police vehicles. "You hear about what they found?" she asked, wrapping her cardigan tighter around her thin frame. I showed her my badge, Detective Marshall. Mind if I ask you a few questions? 7 years, she said, unprompted. 7 years that house has been empty, except it hasn't been. I felt that familiar prickle at the back of my neck, the sensation that arrives when a case is about to deepen. "What do you mean, Mrs. Landry?" "Lights in the basement, just little flickers like a candle every few months. I told Officer Brennan when they cleared the house after Albert died, but nobody followed up." She tilted her head, considering the house, and sometimes I'd hear something like a scratching, faint, mind you, could have been anything. Raccoons, mice, old houses make noises. I noted her statement in my small leather notebook. Did you know an Elena, anyone by that name connected to the house? Mrs. Landry's face changed then, a subtle tightening around the eyes. Elena was Albert's daughter, ran away when she was 16. That would have been 85, 86 maybe. He never spoke of her again, told everyone she was dead. The chill that ran through me had nothing to do with the October breeze. I thanked Mrs. Landry and approached the house, ducking under the yellow police tape that cordoned off the porch. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with dust and neglect. I moved carefully through the first floor, noting the outdated furniture draped in sheets, the faded wallpaper, the stopped clock on the mantelpiece, 3:47, though whether it was morning or afternoon when the battery died, there was no way to know. The basement door was in the kitchen. It looked ordinary from this side, no scratches, no carvings, just peeling green paint and a tarnished brass knob. I opened it slowly, switched on my flashlight, and descended the wooden stairs that creaked beneath my weight. The basement was like most from houses of this era: concrete floor, stone foundation walls, small windows near the ceiling that let in thin shafts of dusty light. Empty except for an old washing machine, some shelving, and a workbench against the far wall. I approached the door, examining it from the inside. The scratches were exactly as photographed, desperate, deep, gouged into the wood with something sharp but irregular. Not a knife, perhaps fingernails, and below them the name Eleanor, carved with more precision, each letter deliberate. I ran my fingers over the indentations, feeling the raw wood exposed beneath the paint. Something on the concrete floor caught my eye, a small dark stain near the bottom of the door. I crouched down, examining it closely with my flashlight. Old blood, perhaps, though it would take the lab to confirm. And beside it, almost invisible against the gray concrete, a single brass key. I bagged the key and called in the forensics team. While waiting, I searched the rest of the basement methodically. The workbench held an assortment of rusting tools, hammers, screwdrivers, pliers. A metal lockbox sat on the bottom shelf, coated in dust except for a clean spot on its lid. Someone had touched it recently. The box was locked, but the key I'd found fit perfectly. Inside was a single item, a faded photograph of a teenage girl with solemn eyes and long dark hair. On the back, written in faded blue ink, Elena, 1985. When I interviewed Elena Price later that afternoon, she sat across from me in the station's interview room, her hands wrapped tightly around a paper cup of untouched coffee. She was in her 50s, her dark hair streaked with gray, her eyes carrying the haunted look of someone who has seen something they cannot explain. I'd never been in that house before, she insisted, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. I've only lived in this town for 5 years. I moved here from Chicago after my divorce. And you've never heard of Albert Willoughby? I asked. Not until I got the listing. She took a shaky breath. Detective, how could my name be carved in that door, in a house I've never entered before yesterday? I showed her the photograph from the lockbox. Does this person look familiar to you? Elena stared at the image, her face draining of color. That's my mother when she was young. Her eyes met mine, wide with confusion. How is this possible? My mother grew up in Chicago. She never lived here. The DNA results came back 3 weeks later. Elena Price was Albert Willoughby's granddaughter. Her mother was indeed the Elena who had run away in 1985, pregnant and afraid. She had changed her name, created a new life in Chicago, never telling her daughter about her past. But the deeper mystery remained unsolved. Who had made those scratches on the inside of the basement door? Who had carved the name of a woman who had never set foot in that house before? We searched property records, interviewed neighbors, examined old police reports. Albert Willoughby had lived alone for decades after his daughter left. No reports of disturbances, no missing persons connected to the address. It was during our third search of the house that we found it, a space behind the basement shelving where the stone foundation had been carefully chiseled away, creating a small room barely 4 feet square. The opening had been plastered over and the shelving unit moved in front, but years of settling had cracked the plaster, revealing the dark space behind. Inside we found a blanket, a plastic water bottle, the cap of a pen that might have been used to make those desperate scratches, and a small journal containing only a single entry. If you find this, my name is Alina. I am trapped. He knows I'm pregnant. He says no grandchild of his will be born in sin. The journal was decades old, the handwriting matching samples we found in Albert's desk upstairs. In the end, we never found remains. No body was buried in the yard or hidden in the walls. But the scratches on that door told a story that science and detective work couldn't fully explain. Sometimes I drive by the house at night after they patched up the wall and before the new owners moved in. Sometimes I imagine I see a flicker of light in the basement window, like a candle, like someone still waiting to be found. Alina Price sold her real estate practice and moved away. Before leaving, she visited the station one last time. My mother never talked about her childhood, she told me, never mentioned her father, but she always kept the doors locked, always checked them twice. And she had nightmares, terrible ones where she'd claw at the air and wake up screaming. I think about the Willoughby house often, about names carved in old wood, about how secrets can seep into the foundations of a place, how they can wait, patient as stone, for the right person to uncover them. For someone carrying the same name, the same blood. They say the house had been empty for years, but something was waiting there all along. Story 3. I remember the first time Sarah Miller called me about the photograph. It was late October, the kind of autumn evening when the air feels like chilled glass and darkness settles in too early. I was finishing paperwork at my desk, the only detective still left in the precinct, when my phone hummed against the weathered oak surface. Detective Marshall, I'm sorry to bother you so late. Her voice was steady but thin, like a thread pulled too tight. Something's happening in my house, and I don't know who else to call. I'd known Sarah for years. She taught 3rd grade at my daughter's elementary school before I transferred to the cold case division. Not the type for late-night panic calls. Take a breath, Sarah. Tell me what's going on. It's going to sound crazy, she whispered. It's about a photograph I bought at an estate sale 3 weeks ago. As she spoke, I reached for my notepad, pen hovering above the empty page. The radiator in the corner of the room hissed softly, pushing warm air into the stillness. I only wanted the frame, she continued. It was this beautiful hand-carved walnut piece. The photograph inside was just an old wedding picture from the 1940s, I think, a bride and groom standing on church steps. I was going to replace it, but her voice trailed off. But what? I prompted, keeping my tone even inviting. The bride's eyes follow me around the room. I know how that sounds, but it's true. She paused, and her face, it's changing. Every day it looks more like me. I've been a detective for 17 years. I've heard all manner of strange stories, most with perfectly rational explanations. but something in Sarah's voice, the controlled fear, the embarrassment at her own words, made me pause before dismissing her concerns. "Have you taken photos of this photograph to document the changes?" "Yes," she said, relief evident in her voice that I hadn't immediately suggested psychiatric help. "I've been taking pictures daily. I can show you." We arranged to meet the following morning. I hung up and sat back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath my weight. Outside my window, the city lights blurred in a light rain that had begun to fall. Sarah lived in one of those century-old Victorians in the historic district, 3 stories of faded grandeur with a wraparound porch and too many windows. When I arrived at 10 the next morning, she met me at the door in a cardigan and jeans, looking like she hadn't slept. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading me through a foyer with high ceilings and into a sitting room where sunlight struggled through heavy drapes. "It's there, on the mantel." The photograph was exactly as she described, a vintage wedding portrait in an ornate walnut frame. The bride wore a classic 1940s gown with a sweetheart neckline, her hair styled in victory rolls. The groom stood tall beside her, his face partially shadowed by the angle of the sun. Nothing remarkable except for the bride's eyes, which seemed to hold an unusual intensity even from where I stood. "May I asked, moving closer. Sarah nodded, wrapping her arms around herself as I lifted the frame from the mantel. The photograph was heavier than I expected, the glass cool against my fingertips. Up close, I could see what Sarah meant about the bride's face. There was something unnervingly familiar in the features, a resemblance to Sarah that seemed both subtle and impossible. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the mouth. "Do you have the photos you've taken?" I asked, setting the frame down carefully. She handed me her phone, open to a gallery of images. I swiped through them slowly, comparing dates. In the earliest photos, the bride was clearly a stranger, but in each subsequent image, the resemblance to Sarah grew incrementally stronger, the hairline shifted, the chin became more pointed, the eyes widened just slightly. "This could be manipulation," I said gently. "Digital alterations." "I thought of that," Sarah said, "but I'm not technologically skilled enough to fake this. And why would I?" She had a point. Sarah Miller was a pragmatic elementary school teacher with no history of attention-seeking behavior. "Tell me about the estate sale. Where did you get this?" She settled into an armchair across from me, her fingers nervously tracing patterns on the upholstery. It was from the Harrington estate about 3 weeks ago. Old Mrs. Harrington passed away at 96, and her family was selling off everything before listing the house. I made a note in my small leather-bound notebook. "Did they tell you anything about the photograph?" "No, they seemed surprised I wanted it. The grandson handling the sale practically gave it to me. Said his grandmother kept it in her attic for decades." I studied the photograph again. The date stamp in the lower corner read June 18, 1947. The bride couldn't have been more than 22. "I'll need to take this with me," I said. "Run some tests on the paper and frame. Maybe there's a logical explanation." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her face. "Please, I haven't been able to sleep. I keep waking up feeling like someone's watching me." As I carefully wrapped the photograph in a soft cloth I kept in my investigation kit, a detail caught my eye, a small pin on the bride's dress that I hadn't noticed before. A delicate silver emblem in the shape of an eye. Back at the precinct lab, I unwrapped the photograph and placed it under specialized lighting. Our forensic technician, Elaine, raised an eyebrow but asked no questions as she helped me examine the image. We took high-resolution scans, analyzed the paper composition, and tested the ink. "It's authentic to the period," Elaine confirmed after several hours. "Silver gelatin print on fiber-based paper, consistent with 1940s photography. No evidence of tampering or overlay." "What about the frame?" I asked, running my fingers along the carved wood. "Hand-carved walnut, also period appropriate, but there's something odd about the backing." She carefully removed the backing board, revealing a hidden compartment containing a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local bride vanishes on wedding night, June 19, 1947. Below it was a picture of the same bride from the photograph, identified as Alina Bennett. According to the article, she disappeared from her hotel room while her husband slept. No signs of struggle, no explanation. The case was never solved. "Alina Bennett," I murmured, scanning for more details. The article mentioned that Alina had been a teacher at the local elementary school before her marriage, the same school where Sarah now taught. A coincidence that made the hair on my neck stand up. I spent the next several hours digging through our archives for any mention of Alina Bennett's disappearance. There wasn't much: a formal missing persons report, a few follow-up interviews with the husband, who was cleared of suspicion, and then nothing. The case had gone cold by autumn of 1947. As evening approached, I called Sarah. "I found something," I told her. "The woman in the photograph was named Alina Bennett. She was a teacher at your school in the 1940s, and she disappeared on her wedding night." The silence that followed lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "Sarah." "I'm still here," she said quietly. "Detective, there's something I didn't tell you. I've been having dreams about being in a hotel room trying to escape, and there's always a man watching me from the doorway. I can never see his face." My mouth went dry. When did these dreams start? The night I brought the photograph home. I returned to Sarah's house that evening with the photograph sealed in an evidence bag. The sun had already set, and the Victorian looked imposing against the deepening blue of the sky. Sarah met me at the door, pale but composed. "I've been researching Alina Bennett all day," she said, leading me inside. "She lived in this house, my house. That can't be coincidence, can it?" I placed the photograph on her coffee table, still in its protective bag. The previous owner, Mrs. Harrington, did she know Alina? Sarah nodded. She was Alina's younger cousin. She inherited the house after Alina disappeared. We sat in contemplative silence for a moment, the only sound the gentle ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. "There's one more thing," I said finally. "We found residue of an unusual chemical compound on the glass of the frame. It's similar to compounds used in certain photographic development processes, but with elements our lab couldn't identify." Sarah leaned forward. "What does that mean?" "I don't know, but I'd like to try something if you're willing." With Sarah's permission, I removed the photograph from its evidence bag and placed it back in its original position on the mantel. Then I set up a time-lapse camera facing it. "If something is happening to this image, we'll document it," I explained. "I'll stay tonight if that's all right with you. Observer protocol." She nodded gratefully, and we settled in for a long night of waiting. Around 2 a.m., with Sarah dozing on the couch, I noticed something that made me sit up straight. The bride's eyes in the photograph seemed to be looking directly at me when I was certain they had been angled slightly to the left before. I moved quietly to check the time-lapse footage, careful not to wake Sarah. The camera had captured what my eyes couldn't perceive in real time, subtle shifts in the image, almost imperceptible movements of the bride's features, gradually morphing to resemble Sarah more closely. As I watched the footage, a chill ran through me. In the latest frame, the groom's face had emerged from shadow enough to reveal a feature I hadn't noticed before, a distinctive scar above his right eyebrow. I recognized that scar. I'd seen it just hours ago when I was researching Aliner's case. It belonged to Richard Bennett, Aliner's husband and the primary suspect in her disappearance despite being cleared. The most unsettling part, Richard Bennett was Mrs. Harrington's brother and Sarah's great uncle, a connection Sarah herself might not even know about. I looked back at the photograph, and for a brief moment I could have sworn the bride's lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. A silent plea for help from across decades. I've been a detective long enough to know when to trust my instincts. Something was happening in this house, something that defied rational explanation but demanded justice nonetheless. Aliner Bennett never had her story told. Somewhere between the walls of this old Victorian and the silvered surface of that photograph, a truth was fighting to emerge. As the night deepened around us, I made a silent promise to the bride with the changing face. I would find out what happened that June night in 1947, no matter how impossible the path to that truth might seem. Because some cases never truly go cold. They just wait for the right person to see what others missed, even if it takes 75 years for that person to arrive. And as I watched over Sarah sleeping fitfully on the couch, I couldn't shake the feeling that Aliner Bennett had been waiting specifically for her all this time. Story 4, I remember the first time I saw it, the trunk. It sat in the corner of a storage unit, untouched for what appeared to be years. Dust had settled into the cracks of its weathered leather exterior, telling a silent story of neglect. I was simply there to catalog abandoned items, a routine procedure for the rental company I worked for. But something about this particular trunk made me pause. Perhaps it was the way the late afternoon light caught its brass fixtures, or the peculiar absence of any identifying marks. No name, no address, nothing to trace it back to its owner. Unit 237 was paid for nearly 7 years in advance, my supervisor had told me earlier that morning. Payment stopped coming 3 months ago. We sent the standard notices, no response. The room around me was otherwise empty, completely empty, except for this single trunk. No furniture, no boxes, no forgotten clothes or mementos, just the trunk, positioned precisely in the center of the concrete floor, as if placed there with deliberate intent. I crouched beside it, running my fingers along its seams. The lock was substantial, old but sturdy. A keyhole with intricate engravings suggested it wasn't a combination lock, but one requiring a specific key, a key we didn't have. Should we force it open? I asked when my supervisor came to check on my progress. She hesitated, tapping her clipboard against her palm in a slow, methodical rhythm. Let's follow protocol. Store it for another 30 days. If no one claims it by then, we'll open it and log the contents. 30 days passed like a slow-moving fog. Each morning I would check the messages, wondering if someone had come forward to claim the mysterious trunk. Each morning no messages waited, no calls, no emails, nothing but silence. On the 31st day, we gathered in the back room of the rental office, myself, my supervisor, and a locksmith with gentle hands and eyes that had seen thousands of locks throughout his career. "Interesting piece," he murmured, examining the trunk. "Victorian era, possibly. The locking mechanism is unusual." His tools moved with precision, working at the lock with a patience born from decades of practice. The room filled with the soft sounds of metal against metal, a whispered conversation between the locksmith and the trunk's secrets. When the lock finally surrendered with a soft click, we all felt it, that momentary hesitation. The locksmith stepped back, his job complete. My supervisor nodded toward me. It was my responsibility to document the contents. I lifted the lid slowly, half expecting to find valuables or perhaps family heirlooms. Instead, what I found was paper. Hundreds upon hundreds of pages, handwritten in a tight, meticulous script. Each page was dated, starting from 12 years prior. "What is it?" my supervisor asked, peering over my shoulder. "Looks like a journal," I replied, carefully lifting the first page. The paper felt delicate between my fingers, the ink slightly faded but still clearly legible. Or maybe hundreds of journals compiled together. The initial pages appeared innocent enough, daily observations, mundane events, reflections on weather and seasons. But as I skimmed further, turning pages with increasing unease, patterns began to emerge. The writer was documenting someone's life in extraordinary detail, a woman's life. March 12th, she purchases coffee at the corner shop again. Same order, medium latte, extra hot. Carries the same blue umbrella though there is no rain forecast. Her hair is shorter now, freshly cut. The barista recognizes her, greets her by name. Emily. Her name is Emily. I felt a chill crawl up my spine despite the warmth of the small back room. Page after page detailed the movements, habits, and private moments of this woman named Emily. What she ate, when she slept, conversations overheard through windows, photos of her walking to work attached with small paper clips to the corresponding entries. "This isn't right," I said, my voice barely audible even to myself. "These are observations, surveillance." My supervisor paled as she reviewed some of the pages. "I'm calling the police," she said, stepping back from the trunk as if it might contain something contagious. Detective Morgan arrived 40 minutes later. She was tall with prematurely silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She listened without interruption as we explained how we'd come to discover the trunk and its disturbing contents. "No one has accessed this unit in 3 months, she asked, slipping on latex gloves before handling the pages. "Not since the payment stopped," my supervisor confirmed. "The automatic door system logs all entries. No one has been here." Detective Morgan spent hours with the contents of the trunk, carefully reviewing the pages, occasionally making notes or photographing certain entries. Her expression remained neutral, professional, but I could see tension building in the set of her shoulders as the afternoon wore on. "The person who wrote these was meticulously tracking this woman's life," she finally said. "For years. The level of detail suggests they were close enough to observe intimate moments but never reveals the author's identity or relationship to her." The detective arranged for the trunk and all its contents to be transported to the police station. "We need to locate this Emily," she explained. "Determine if she's safe, if she's aware she was being watched like this." I couldn't shake the memory of those pages from my mind as I drove home that evening. The handwriting so neat, so controlled, the obsessive attention to detail. the clinical tone that somehow made everything more disturbing. 2 days later, Detective Morgan called me back to the station. The trunk sat open on a large table in an evidence room, its contents now organized into labeled folders. "We found her," the detective said without preamble. "Emily Carter, 34, elementary school teacher, lives in the Westbrook neighborhood." "Is she okay?" I asked, relief washing over me. Detective Morgan's expression didn't change. "She's fine, completely unaware of any surveillance, but there's something else." She handed me a photograph. "This was taken from city records. Emily Carter rented your unit 237 7 years ago." I stared at the photo, uncomprehending at first. The woman in the image had kind eyes and a hesitant smile. I had never seen her before. "I don't understand," I admitted. "She was stalking herself." "That's what we thought initially," the detective said, her voice measured and calm. "But the handwriting analysis doesn't match samples of Emily's writing, and she has an alibi for times when some of these observations were recorded. She couldn't have written them." "Well, then who did?" Detective Morgan gestured to the trunk. The final entry was dated exactly 3 months ago, the same time the payments stopped. She handed me the last page from the collection, protected now in a clear evidence sleeve. The entry was shorter than the others, just a few sentences. "April 18th, she suspects now I've been careless, left too many signs. The rental payment is scheduled to lapse. When they find this, they'll come looking for her. By then, everything will have changed." She opens the trunk. I felt the room tilt slightly as the implication of those words sank in. She opens the trunk, not "I open the trunk," as if the writer anticipated discovery not by themselves, but by the subject of their obsession. "We've increased patrols in Miss Carter's neighborhood," Detective Morgan said, watching my reaction carefully. "She's been informed of the situation and is taking precautions, but whoever wrote these, they're still out there," I finished for her. "Yes, and they wanted this trunk to be found. They wanted us to know they were watching her." In the months that followed, I found myself scanning faces in crowds, wondering if I might somehow recognize the person who had filled that trunk with their obsession. Emily Carter moved away eventually, started fresh somewhere else with a new name and identity. The investigation continued, but with few leads and no new evidence. Sometimes at night, I still think about those final words. She opens the trunk, not as an ending, but as a beginning, as if the discovery of the trunk wasn't the conclusion of the story, but merely its opening chapter. As if somewhere in a place we haven't found, there might be another trunk waiting, another collection of pages, another life documented in chilling detail. And sometimes, on particularly quiet nights, I wonder if anyone is watching me now, documenting my movements, my habits, my life, writing down the moment when I, too, opened a trunk that wasn't meant for me. Story 5. The evening air was cool against my skin as I watched Sarah's golden retriever, Cooper, dig furiously at the far corner of her backyard. There's something about the way dogs dig committed, methodical, as if they've discovered some secret that humans will never understand. The soft sound of dirt being displaced filled the twilight quiet. Sarah laughed at first, calling him a silly boy in that affectionate tone pet owners use when they're mildly annoyed but mostly amused. Neither of us knew then how that moment would change everything. I remember the exact second her expression shifted. The laughter died on her lips as Cooper pulled something from the dark soil, something that caught the fading light in an unnatural way. Not a bone or a forgotten toy, something else. "What is that?" Sarah's voice had dropped to just above a whisper. I followed her across the damp grass. Cooper had retreated a few feet away, suddenly uninterested in his discovery. Strange how animals sense things sometimes, an instinct humans have largely forgotten. Partially buried in the disturbed earth lay a paper mask, the kind you might find at a craft store. But this was no cheerful creation meant for a child's birthday party. The material had begun to decay from moisture and time, but its features remained discernible: a crude face with a smile that stretched too wide, painted with uneven strokes of what once might have been red paint, but now appeared as rust-colored stains against the deteriorating paper. Sarah knelt beside it, careful not to touch it directly. That's when she noticed something else: a small folded piece of paper tucked underneath. Using a fallen twig, she carefully slid it out and unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, almost methodical. 5 words that made the air around us suddenly feel heavier. "You were supposed to wear this." We looked at each other, uncertainty hanging between us like a physical presence. The note held no signature, no additional context, just those 5 words that somehow transformed the decaying mask from an odd discovery into something that made my skin prickle. "It's probably just teenagers," I suggested, though my voice lacked conviction. "Some kind of prank they never finished." Sarah nodded, but her eyes kept returning to the mask and the note. She took a photo with her phone before carefully placing both items in a plastic grocery bag she retrieved from her kitchen. We didn't discuss it further that evening, and when I left her house around 9, the incident felt strange, but ultimately inconsequential, the kind of odd story you tell at dinner parties for a mild reaction. But the next morning, my phone rang early. Sarah's voice came through tight and controlled, the kind of calm that takes significant effort to maintain. "Someone left something on my porch," she said. "What is it?" I asked, though I already suspected. "Another mask," she whispered, "identical to the one Cooper found, but this one's brand new." I drove to her house immediately. The morning was bright, and ordinary neighbors walking dogs, sprinklers ticking rhythmically on perfectly manicured lawns, normal life continuing while Sarah's world tilted on its axis. The new mask sat on her kitchen counter, sealed in another plastic bag. It was unmistakably the same design as the buried one, but pristine. The same distorted smile, the same crude features, but the colors were vibrant, the red of the smile almost garish against the white background. There was no note this time, just the mask, left sometime during the night. Her doorbell camera had caught nothing, just static, for a 3-minute period around 2 a.m. "Have you called the police?" I asked. Sarah nodded. "They're sending someone," but her voice trailed off. We both understood. What crime had been committed? A strange gift left on a porch, a buried mask in her own yard. The implication was unsettling, but implications aren't evidence. Officer Mercer arrived an hour later, mid-40s, with the practiced neutrality of someone who has heard every kind of story. He listened carefully, examined both masks without touching them, and took photographs. His expression remained unreadable, but I noticed him scanning the yard with heightened interest when Sarah mentioned how long she'd lived in the house. "Just 8 months," she said. "I bought it from an elderly couple moving to Florida." Something in Officer Mercer's demeanor shifted slightly. He made a note in his small black notebook. "The Garveys," he said, not looking up. "They lived here about 5 years." "Did you know them?" I asked. "Not personally," his pen paused, "but I knew who lived here before them." The silence that followed felt significant. Sarah and I exchanged glances. The house was vacant for almost a year before the Garveys purchased it. Officer Mercer continued, his voice measured. The previous owner was a man named Leon Caldwell. The name hung in the air, clearly meant to signify something. "Should I know that name?" Sarah asked. Officer Mercer closed his notebook. "Probably not. It was before your time in town. Caldwell was arrested in connection with the disappearance of 3 women between 2011 and 2012. The cases were never fully resolved." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean by not fully resolved?" "Caldwell died in custody before trial, heart attack." Mercer's eyes moved to the fence line where Cooper had made his discovery. They never found sufficient evidence to definitively link him to the disappearances, but there were suggestions, witnesses who placed the missing women near his property, unusual items found in his possession. "What kind of items?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. Officer Mercer hesitated. "I wasn't directly involved in the investigation, but I remember hearing about masks, handmade paper masks." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm. The connection was impossible to ignore the buried mask, the new identical one appearing on her doorstep. "But that was over a decade ago," I said, trying to find some rational explanation. "Why would someone leave these now?" "That's what we need to figure out," Mercer replied, reaching for his radio to request additional officers. The investigation that followed revealed layers of history I never imagined existed in our quiet suburb. Leon Caldwell, it turned out, had been a craftsman who specialized in theatrical props and masks before his retirement. The 3 women who disappeared, Elaine Moss, Teresa DuPont, and Jennifer Whalen, had no obvious connections to each other, except that each had been seen in the vicinity of Caldwell's home shortly before vanishing. Sarah's backyard became the focus of intense scrutiny. Ground-penetrating radar revealed nothing conclusive, but cadaver dogs showed interest in multiple areas along the fence line. The investigation expanded to include forensic soil testing and a deep background check on anyone connected to Caldwell or the missing women. 2 weeks after Cooper's discovery, another break came: a small box left at Sarah's workplace. Inside was a yellowed newspaper clipping about Caldwell's arrest and a hand-drawn map of her backyard with an X marked in the north corner. The package had been delivered by a courier service, paid for in cash by an elderly woman whose description matched no one involved in the original cases. Police excavated the marked spot and found a small metal box containing 3 drivers' licenses: Moss, DuPont, and Whalen. The final piece of evidence needed to confirm what many had suspected but couldn't prove. As I sit here now, watching the forensic team methodically grid Sarah's yard for further excavation, I can't help but wonder about the timing of it all. Why now? Who kept this secret for so long, only to reveal it through such an elaborate, haunting method? The most disturbing theory came from Detective Langan, who joined the investigation after the licenses were found. Sometimes accomplices develop conscience as they age. Sometimes they want the truth known before they die themselves. Whoever buried that first mask and left its twin on Sarah's porch hasn't been identified yet, but their message was received. The masks that were meant to be worn by women who disappeared over a decade ago have finally told their story. And somewhere, I suspect, an aging accomplice is finally sleeping better at night, having transferred their burden to us, the unwitting inheritors of a truth that had been buried for far too long. Story 6. The pipes had been making noise for days, but when the plumber opened the crawl space, he found a mattress, food wrappers, and a cell phone still charging. On the wall in red marker was written, "Only move when she's sleeping." I remember the call coming in on a Tuesday morning, the kind of autumn day where the light filters through half-bare trees, casting long shadows across my desk. I'm Detective Morgan Reeves, 23 years with Riverside Police, and I thought I'd seen everything until Sarah Cooper's case file landed on my desk. Case number 2187, Be Missing Person turned home invasion of the most unsettling kind. The first time I walked into Sarah's house, nothing seemed amiss. A modest two-bedroom craftsman with hardwood floors that creaked beneath my shoes, the kind of place that holds stories in its walls. Sarah, 34, lived alone after her divorce 3 years prior, elementary school teacher, well-liked by colleagues, no known enemies. I kept hearing noises, she told me, her fingers wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. At first I thought it was just the house settling, old pipes, maybe mice in the walls. Her voice was steady, but her eyes kept darting toward the floor vent in the corner of her living room. "When did you first notice the sounds?" I asked, my pen hovering above my notepad. "About 6 weeks ago. Small things at first, a creak here, a thump there, always at night, always when I was just about to fall asleep." The timeline matched what we'd pieced together. Sarah had returned from a 2-week vacation in early September. The noises began shortly after. What she didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that someone had been watching her house, waiting for her departure, waiting to move in beneath her. "Did you notice anything missing from your home?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "That's the strange part. Nothing was ever gone, but things would be different. A coffee mug I was sure I'd left in the sink would be in the dishwasher. My shampoo bottle would be slightly emptier than I remembered. My laptop would be warm in the morning, though I'd shut it down the night before." I remember writing these details down, the scratch of my pen against paper, the only sound in the room for several long moments. The hair on my arms stood on end, though the house was warm. The truth would come out 3 days later when Sarah finally called a plumber about the persistent knocking in her pipes. Martin Delgado had been doing plumbing work for 30 years, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he found when he removed the access panel to the crawl space beneath Sarah's house. I arrived at the scene 20 minutes after the 911 call. Sarah was sitting in a patrol car, a blanket around her shoulders despite the mild day. The plumber was smoking a cigarette on the front steps, his hands visibly shaking. "I've seen rats, possums, even a family of raccoons once," he told me, his voice barely above a whisper, "but never anything like this." The crawl space beneath Sarah's home was approximately 3 feet high and ran the length of the house. Most homeowners never ventured into these spaces, dark, dusty areas meant only for pipes and wiring, but someone had made it their home. I had to duck low to enter, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The beam illuminated what could only be described as a nest, a thin mattress pressed against one wall, empty food containers neatly stacked, a plastic bottle that had clearly been used as a toilet, and most disturbing of all, a small opening in the floorboards that aligned perfectly with the air vent in Sarah's living room. But it was the wall that made my stomach turn. Covered in red marker were dozens of notes, observations, times, patterns. Showers at 6:45 a.m. on weekdays. Watches TV until 10:30 p.m. on Fridays. Talks in her sleep. Names: Michael X, Mom, someone named Charlie. Heavy sleeper after wine. and they're larger than the rest, only move when she's sleeping. The forensic team spent hours photographing and collecting evidence, fingerprints, hair samples, the cell phone still connected to a portable charger that had been spliced into Sarah's electrical system. A small digital camera with hundreds of photos of Sarah moving through her home, unaware. The identity of the intruder emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in solution. Jacob Mercer, 39, no fixed address. A history of stalking complaints, though nothing that had resulted in serious charges. He had worked briefly at the coffee shop Sarah frequented each morning, had served her lattes with a smile for 2 months before disappearing from his job without notice. That was when he moved into her crawl space. We found him 3 days later, sleeping in a storage unit across town. He had another collection of photographs, more notes, plans for other homes, other women. When questioned, he spoke softly, reasonably, as if what he had done was the most natural thing in the world. "I just wanted to know her," he said, his eyes never meeting mine across the interrogation table. "To really know someone, you have to see them when they think they're alone." The psychological evaluation described him as suffering from erotomania, a delusional belief that Sarah was in love with him, despite having barely interacted. In his mind, he was protecting her, watching over her as she slept. Sarah Cooper sold her house 3 weeks later. She couldn't bear to walk on floors knowing what had transpired beneath them. Couldn't look at the air vents without imagining eyes staring back at her. The last time I spoke with her, she was staying with her sister in another state, considering a teaching position far from Riverside. "The worst part," she told me during our final interview, "is knowing that while I was sleeping in my bed, feeling safe in my home, he was just there, listening to me breathe, watching my ceilings become his floors." Jacob Mercer was sentenced to 8 years for breaking and entering, stalking, and illegal surveillance. Psychiatric treatment was mandated as part of his sentence. Sometimes I wonder if it will help, if anything can correct the wiring in a mind that sees nothing wrong with living in the shadows of someone else's life. I still drive by Sarah's old house occasionally. New owners have moved in, a young couple with a baby on the way. The real estate disclosure laws didn't require them to be told about what happened there. Sometimes I wonder if they hear noises in the pipes, if they ever feel eyes upon them when they're alone. And sometimes in the quiet of night, when my own house settles and creaks, I find myself staring at the air vents, wondering what might be on the other side. Because the most frightening truth about Jacob Mercer isn't what he did. It's how long he did it before anyone noticed. Story 7. The light cast a soft glow across the floorboards as I stepped into the bedroom of the abandoned Walcott residence. Rain tapped gently against the windows, creating a rhythm that seemed to match my footsteps. 3 weeks into this investigation, and this seemingly tranquil country house had revealed nothing but ordinary surfaces and empty rooms until now. "You'll want to see this," Detective Mercer had said over the phone, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. "The nursery." I didn't know there was a nursery. According to the floor plans I'd studied, this space was marked as storage, a blank rectangle on paper that had somehow transformed into something entirely different in reality. The room was painted a delicate shade of pink, not faded with age but preserved in an unnatural perfection. A white crib stood against the far wall, its wooden rails gleaming as if recently polished. A mobile hung above it, stars dangling in perfect stillness despite the slight draft that whispered through the house. As I moved closer, I noticed that each star carried the same message: written in precise, flowing script. Stay. The floor beneath my feet didn't creak. Nothing in this room showed the 20 years of abandonment that marked the rest of the house. It was a frozen moment, a space out of time. "We found the door 3 hours ago," Mercer said, standing in the doorway behind me. Her notebook was open, but she wasn't writing. It was concealed behind a bookcase in the master bedroom. The family who bought this place last month never knew it existed. I ran my fingers along the edge of a changing table, expecting dust but finding none. And the Walcotts, the original owners, disappeared in 2003. Both parents, no children. Mercer's voice remained low, as if she were afraid to disturb something in the room. At least, that was what we always believed. The crib drew me closer. Unlike everything else in the room, it wasn't just placed there, it was secured. Metal brackets fastened its legs to the floor, the bolts new and tight. I knelt down to examine them, the cold metal sharp against my fingertips. "Check the windows," Mercer suggested, still not entering the room. I crossed to the window where rain continued its gentle percussion. The view showed the sprawling backyard, overgrown now but once carefully tended. When I pressed my hand against the glass, I felt no coolness, no vibration from the raindrops that seemed to be hitting it. I knocked gently. The sound that returned wasn't glass, it was solid wall. "It's painted," I said, the realization spreading through me like cold water. A trompe l'oeil, perfect perspective, but it's just wall. Mercer nodded. "All of them are. No actual windows in this room." I turned slowly, seeing the space with new eyes. Not a nursery, a prison. One designed with care and attention to detail. One meant to look normal to its occupant. One with no way out except the single door. The door that now stood empty behind me. Mercer was gone. I moved quickly to the doorway, heart suddenly racing against the calm I'd maintained. The hallway beyond was dark, darker than it should have been in the middle of the afternoon. I reached for the light switch beside the door frame. "Nothing happened." Mercer, my voice sounded different in the room, absorbed somehow by the soft surfaces and perfect corners. The click behind me was subtle but unmistakable. The door. I turned the handle, already knowing what I would find. It didn't move. From somewhere in the house came the sound of footsteps receding, too heavy to be Mercer's, too deliberate. I pressed my back against the door, the room's peaceful appearance now a mockery. The mobile above the crib began to turn, though there was no breeze to move it. The stars circled slowly, each one catching what little light remained as they revolved. Stay. In the silence that followed, I heard something else, breathing, not mine. It came from the closet, the one door in the room I hadn't yet opened. The sound was shallow, patient, waiting. I reached for my phone only to find my pocket empty. On the changing table where I'd been standing minutes before, the screen glowed briefly and then went dark. Beside it lay a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. Moving slowly, I crossed the room. The paper was thick, expensive stationery with a letterhead I recognized instantly. The Walcott Foundation for Children, the charity established by the missing family's estate after their disappearance. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded it. "We've been watching you investigate our case for weeks," the handwritten note began. "Your theories about what happened to us were closer than anyone's been in 20 years, but you missed something important. We didn't disappear because we were running from something. We disappeared because we found something that needed tending. something that needs very specific care. The breathing from the closet grew slightly louder. Every 20 years it needs a new guardian, someone patient, someone detail-oriented, someone who won't stop until they find answers. The mobile continued its slow rotation, the stars now casting small, sharp shadows across the pink walls. Someone exactly like you. The closet door began to open, moving with the same deliberate patience that had characterized everything about this room. I could run to it and force it closed, or I could stay where I was and face whatever waited on the other side. But the note wasn't finished. The final lines sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. By the time you're reading this, the door will be sealed again. The nursery has accepted you, and in 20 more years you'll choose the next guardian, just as we chose you, just as the guardian before us chose us. The closet door swung fully open now, revealing not darkness but a soft, glowing light. In that light stood a crib identical to the one bolted to the floor behind me. Inside it lay something small, wrapped in a blanket. It wasn't moving, it wasn't making the breathing sounds. Those came from somewhere else, somewhere much closer. I felt breath on the back of my neck, warm, living breaths. "Welcome," whispered a voice that might have been a man's or a woman's. "We've been waiting for you for a very long time." I didn't turn around, I couldn't. The mobile continued its hypnotic rotation above the empty crib, and somewhere in the house, I heard the sound of a bookcase sliding back into place, covering a door that would not be found again for 20 years. The glow from the closet grew brighter, inviting. The thing in the blanket still didn't move. "It needs you," the voice behind me said. "And now you need it too." I took a step forward toward the closet, toward the thing waiting for its guardian. Behind me, the voice made a sound of approval. I was too far into this mystery now to turn back. Whatever waited in that room beyond the closet had waited for me specifically, had called to me through case files and evidence and the strange, unexpected door behind a bookcase. Some doors once found can never be unfound. Some rooms once entered never let you leave. The rain continued its gentle rhythm against windows that didn't exist, and somewhere far away, Detective Mercer would be filling out a report about another disappearance at the Walcott house. Another unsolved case in a file that would someday draw another investigator, another guardian. But for now, there was only the nursery, the closet, and the thing that needed tending. For now, there was only me. And 20 years of staying. Story 8, I've been a detective in this small coastal town for 17 years. The kind of place where the fog rolls in every evening like clockwork, where the lighthouse beam sweeps across darkened windows, and where most crimes involve nothing more serious than petty theft or teenagers breaking curfew. That changed 6 months ago, when I received a call that would lead me down a path I never expected to travel. The voice on the other end of the line belonged to Dr. Alina Reeves, a respected dermatologist whose practice overlooked the harbor. Her words came measured and precise, each one carefully chosen as if she were handling delicate evidence herself. "Detective, I have a patient here who, well, she has something you should see." The examination room was bathed in that particular clinical light that makes everyone look slightly ill. The patient, Meredith Walsh, sat on the edge of the paper-covered table, her shoulder exposed. She was 32, with auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, and eyes that darted nervously around the room as I entered. "I never got a tattoo," she said before I could introduce myself. "I need you to understand that. I've never had one in my life." I nodded, moving closer to examine what Dr. Reeves was pointing to. There on Meredith's right shoulder blade was a small symbol about the size of a quarter. Not quite a spiral, not quite a triangle. 3 curved lines that formed something like a stylized eye, rendered in deep blue-black ink that stood in stark contrast to her pale skin. "When did you first notice this?" I asked, my voice deliberately calm, the same tone I'd used to coax information from a frightened witness. 3 days ago, I was stepping out of the shower, drying off when I caught it in the mirror. Meredith's voice trembled slightly. At first I thought it was dirt or maybe a bruise, but it wouldn't wash off. When I looked closer, I realized it was this. Dr. Reeves interjected, her clinical demeanor momentarily slipping. "Detective, I've examined it thoroughly. This is no temporary marking. The pigment is deep in the dermis layer. This is a professional tattoo, at least several days old, possibly older." I felt the familiar weight of my notebook in my hand as I made notes, the scratch of my pen against paper filling the silence. Just another sound in a room full of quiet breathing and the distant hum of medical equipment. "Have you experienced any unusual events recently? Unexplained gaps in time, unusual people showing interest in you?" Meredith shook her head, then paused. "I did have a weird dream last week. I dreamt I was lying face down and there was a buzzing sound. I couldn't move." She shivered despite the warmth of the room, but it was just a dream. I finished taking my statement and gave Meredith my card, asking her to call if she remembered anything else or if anything else unusual happened. As I left the medical center, the cold wind from the harbor cut through my jacket, and I found myself thinking about an old case, one that had never been solved. Back at the station, I made my way to the archives. The basement level always smelled of old paper and the particular mustiness that comes from documents rarely disturbed. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across metal shelving units that stretched toward the back wall. My footsteps echoed as I moved between the rows, searching for a specific box. Case 87442. The Cameron Homicide. The cardboard was soft at the corners from age and humidity. I set it down carefully on the small desk in the corner and began to sort through its contents. Crime scene photos, witness statements, forensic reports, all the pieces of a puzzle that had never come together. 13 years ago, before I had my detective's shield, a young woman named Diana Cameron had been found dead along the shoreline path. The case had gone cold within months. I flipped through the black and white photographs, the images familiar even after all these years. Diana's body had been found posed, her arms crossed over her chest, her face peaceful as if she were merely sleeping. The only sign of violence had been a single mark carved into her right shoulder blade. My hand stilled as I found the close-up photograph I was looking for. There it was, 3 curved lines forming a stylized eye, identical to the mark on Meredith Walsh's shoulder. The similarity couldn't be coincidental, but how could Meredith have the same mark that had been cut into Diana Cameron's skin 13 years ago, and why did it suddenly appear as a tattoo? I pulled the case file, tucking it into my briefcase. The weight of it felt significant against my side as I drove home through streets washed gray by persistent drizzle. The windshield wipers kept rhythm with my thoughts as I considered the possibilities. None of them made sense. That night I spread the Cameron file across my kitchen table. Steam rose from my coffee mug, curling in the air like question marks as I compared the photographs to the digital images Dr. Reeves had sent me of Meredith's tattoo. The similarity was undeniable. The following morning, I requested access to the evidence storage for the Cameron case. The original detective, now retired, had preserved a journal found in Diana's apartment. Its pages were filled with intricate drawings, including several variations of the same symbol now etched onto Meredith's skin. In the margins, Diana had written cryptic notes about dreams, about lying face down while unable to move, about a buzzing sound. Just like Meredith's dream. I arranged to meet Meredith again, this time at the station. She arrived wearing a high-necked blouse despite the warm spring day, as if trying to hide the mark even from herself. "Have you ever heard of Diana Cameron?" I asked after she'd settled into the chair across from my desk. The name brought no recognition to her eyes. No, should I have? I showed her the journal, careful not to reveal the more disturbing aspects of the case. Meredith's fingers traced the drawings on the pages, her expression a mixture of fascination and fear. "These are the same as my tattoo," she whispered. Who was she? Someone who lived in this town 13 years ago. She drew these symbols repeatedly in the weeks before her death. Meredith's hand flew to her mouth. Her death. I nodded, watching her reaction carefully. Diana was found deceased 13 years ago. She had this same symbol on her shoulder. The color drained from Meredith's face. What does it mean? "That's what I'm trying to figure out," I said. "Did you ever cross paths with Diana, even briefly, maybe in school or at a local event?" Meredith shook her head. "I only moved here 4 years ago for work. I never knew her." As we talked, I learned that Meredith had recently started experiencing unusual dreams, not just the one about the buzzing sound, but others involving water, darkness, and a sense of being watched. She'd begun sleeping poorly, waking with the feeling that someone had been in her room. Over the next few weeks, I delved deeper into both Diana's case and Meredith's situation. I discovered that Diana had been seeing a psychiatrist before her death, complaining of similar dreams. The psychiatrist's notes mentioned a shared delusion, but didn't elaborate on what that meant or who else might have been involved. I traced Diana's movements in the weeks before her death and found that she had visited an antique shop that no longer existed. The owner had passed away years ago, but his daughter still lived in town. When I interviewed her, she remembered Diana coming in repeatedly to look at a particular artifact, a small bronze mirror with 3 curved lines engraved on its handle. "Dad sold it to her eventually," the woman told me, pouring tea into delicate cups that clinked softly against their saucers. "He was hesitant at first, said it had a strange history." "What kind of history?" "Something about it being found in the possessions of another woman who died mysteriously in the 1970s. Dad was superstitious about certain items, said some things carry memories or intentions with them." I left with more questions than answers, the weight of uncertainty settling around my shoulders like the ever-present coastal fog. That evening, as I drove past Meredith's apartment building on my way home, I noticed her standing at her window, staring out at nothing, one hand absently rubbing her shoulder where the mark lay hidden beneath her clothing. 3 days later, Meredith called me in a panic. "The tattoo is changing," she said, her voice tight with fear. "It feels warm and the lines seem darker." I met her at Dr. Reeves' office again. The dermatologist confirmed that the pigment appeared to be spreading slightly, the lines becoming more defined. "This isn't normal for any tattoo," Dr. Reeves said, her professional composure noticeably shaken. "Tattoos fade over time, they don't intensify." As I drove home that night, the pieces began to shift in my mind, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Diana's journal entries had grown more frantic in the days before her death. She had written about the mark growing stronger, about feeling pulled toward the ocean, about hearing voices in the crashing of the waves. Meredith lived 5 blocks from the shore. I made a decision then, turning my car around and heading back to Meredith's apartment. She needed protection, whether from herself or from whatever force had marked both her and Diana. The lights were off in her unit when I arrived. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was in perfect order, except for a note on the kitchen counter. "I understand now, it's calling me. The water knows my name." I ran back to my car, tires squealing as I headed for the shoreline path where Diana's body had been found 13 years before. Rain had begun to fall, heavy drops striking my windshield like warnings I couldn't quite decipher. The beam from my flashlight cut through darkness and rain as I moved along the path. The waves crashed against the rocks below with a rhythmic persistence, like a heartbeat growing stronger. I found Meredith standing at the edge of the cliff, her face turned toward the black water below, rain plastering her hair to her face. "Meredith," I called, keeping my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "Step back from the edge." She turned slowly, her eyes unfocused. "Detective," she said, her voice strangely calm. "I found it, the mirror. It was in a box of items I bought at an estate sale when I first moved here. I never opened it until last week." I moved closer, one careful step at a time. The bronze mirror with the 3 curved lines. She nodded. When I touched it, I felt connected to something, someone. She looked back toward the water. "She's down there waiting, Diana and others before her." "Meredith, come away from the edge. We'll figure this out together." For a moment she seemed to consider it. Then her hand moved to her shoulder, fingers pressing against the mark beneath her rain-soaked blouse. "It's too late," she whispered. "The tattoo isn't just on my skin anymore, it's inside me now." I lunged forward as she swayed, managing to grasp her arm and pull her away from the edge. She didn't resist as I led her back to my car and drove her to the hospital. The psychiatrist who examined her recommended immediate admission, noting symptoms of a dissociative episode. That night I returned to Meredith's apartment with a search warrant. I found the bronze mirror in her bedroom drawer, exactly as described, small, tarnished, with 3 curved lines forming that same stylized eye on its handle. As I picked it up, I felt an unusual warmth radiating from the metal despite the coolness of the room. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something move across its surface. Not my reflection, but a woman's face, her expression an unsettling mixture of sadness and hunger. I placed the mirror in an evidence bag and locked it in my trunk. The next morning I checked on Meredith at the hospital. The psychiatrist reported she had slept soundly for the first time in weeks, and there was something else, the tattoo was fading. "It's barely visible now," the doctor told me, showing me photographs taken upon her admission compared to that morning. "I've never seen pigment dissipate like this before." I nodded, not sharing what I suspected, that the force behind the mark had released her once I'd removed the mirror from her possession. The mirror now sits in an evidence locker at the station, sealed in its bag. I've requisitioned a secure box with a lock for it, with strict instructions that it not be handled directly. My report reflects only the facts that can be explained rationally. Meredith's apparent self-tattooing during a dissociative state, her fixation on an old local case she must have read about somewhere, the psychological stress that led to her episode on the cliff. But sometimes, late at night when the fog rolls in and the lighthouse beam sweeps across my window, I find myself absently rubbing my own shoulder blade. In those moments, I could swear I feel something beneath my skin, something that wasn't there before, 3 curved lines, forming the suggestion of an eye that never closes, never sleeps, just waits for the next person to hold the mirror and become marked. I haven't dreamed of buzzing sounds. Not yet. Story 9, I still remember the weight of that envelope in my hands, not physically heavy, just a standard white business envelope, but carrying the kind of weight that changes everything that comes after. It was a Tuesday in late October when we found it, the kind of autumn day where the light seems to fade too early, casting long shadows across the floorboards we'd been pulling up all afternoon. The renovation of the Caldwell house on Maple Street had been going smoothly for 3 weeks. Nothing remarkable about the place, a 1970s split level that needed updating, the kind of project my small contracting company handles a dozen times a year. Sarah Caldwell had inherited the house from her grandmother and wanted to modernize before moving in. We'd already gutted the kitchen, updated the bathrooms, and were starting on the living room walls when Mike's crowbar caught something unusual. "Hold up," he called over the sound of my drill. "There's something in here." Between the studs, tucked into a crevice where the drywall met the insulation, was an envelope. It wasn't stained or aged like you'd expect from something hidden inside a wall for decades. This looked fresh, maybe only a few years old at most. No dust, no water damage, just clean white paper sealed shut. I remember setting down my tools slowly, the metal making a dull thud against the dropped cloth. The room felt suddenly quieter, though nothing had changed except my awareness. Mike handed me the envelope without a word. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It wasn't marked at all. "Should we open it?" Mike asked, his voice lower than usual. "Or give it to the owner?" I turned it over in my hands, feeling the slight weight shift of whatever was inside. Not papers, something more solid, something small. "Let's open it," I said finally. "If it's important, we'll tell Ms. Caldwell." The seal came apart easily, not brittle with age but tacky, as if closed recently. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph. The image showed a woman sitting on a brown leather couch, reading a book. Her living room curtains were partly open, and the picture had clearly been taken from outside through her window. The woman was Sarah Caldwell. I felt the chill crawl up my spine slowly, like cold water seeping into fabric. In that moment, the house around us seemed to listen, the emptiness of the rooms more noticeable than before. "Turn it over," Mike whispered. Written on the back in blue ballpoint pen were 7 words. "You smiled for this one." The handwriting was neat, almost cheerful, with a small curve to the Y that gave it an unsettling personal touch. I slipped the photo back into the envelope, suddenly not wanting to touch it anymore. The implications settled into my consciousness gradually, like sediment in still water. Someone had been watching Sarah. Someone had hidden this in her grandmother's house, in a wall that we weren't supposed to open for another 20 years at least. "We need to call the police," I said finally, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. The detective who arrived was a woman named Marquez, with tired eyes and a methodical way of moving that suggested experience with cases that didn't end well. She bagged the envelope carefully, asking us to walk through the discovery step by step. Then she asked us not to mention this to anyone, especially not Sarah Caldwell. "We don't want to alarm her unnecessarily," Detective Marquez explained, though her expression suggested there was more to it. "I'll need to investigate whether this is connected to anything in our system." 2 days later, I received a call asking me to come to the station. The small interview room had pale green walls that had probably once been meant to be calming, but now just looked sick under the fluorescent lights. Detective Marquez laid 3 photographs on the table, all Polaroids, all with the same handwriting on the back. These were found in the personal effects of Sarah Caldwell's grandmother after she died, she explained. Sarah never saw them. The executor of the estate turned them over to us when they appeared suspicious. Each showed Sarah at different times in different places, at a coffee shop, getting into her car, walking her dog at dusk. Each bore a similar message: beautiful when you laugh, I like the red sweater, almost saw me this time. The grandmother reported a stalking case 3 years ago, Marquez continued, her voice maintaining that professional calm that only made everything feel more serious. She claimed someone was following her, watching the house. We investigated but found nothing conclusive. She dropped it eventually, said she must have been imagining things. The realization settled over me slowly, like the gradual dimming of light at sunset. The stalker wasn't targeting the grandmother, I said. No, Marquez confirmed. We believe he was using the grandmother's house to watch Sarah, maybe even accessing it somehow. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the walls we'd opened, about the spaces between studs, the crawl spaces, the attic access, all the hidden places in a house where someone could conceal not just photographs, but themselves. I thought about how Sarah Caldwell was planning to move into that house in less than a month. The investigation continued quietly. They brought in specialists to examine the entire house, checking for hidden cameras, listening devices, or any other signs of intrusion. They found nothing, yet the photograph in the wall suggested recent activity. Whoever was watching Sarah might still be watching, waiting. 3 weeks into the investigation, with our renovation work on hold, Detective Marquez called me again. This time, her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. "We received another Polaroid," she said without preamble, "left on the windshield of Miss Caldwell's car yesterday. The message says, 'Don't let them change our house.'" The possessiveness in those words, "our house," left me with a hollow feeling in my chest. The stalker knew about the renovations, knew they had been paused, was still watching. Sarah Caldwell was placed under police protection, and the investigation widened to include her workplace, her social circle, anyone who might have developed this dangerous obsession. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. A neighbor 2 doors down from the grandmother's house mentioned that her son had briefly dated Sarah in college 10 years earlier. The relationship had ended badly, but she hadn't thought to mention it because it was so long ago. The son, Robert Keller, had moved away years ago, supposedly to Colorado. But when police checked, they found his apartment there had been sublet for the past 4 years. His mail forwarded to a P.O. box just 3 miles from Sarah's grandmother's neighborhood. They found him living in a small rental house, the walls covered with photographs of Sarah spanning years of surveillance. Robert had carefully documented her life from a distance, building what he believed was a relationship. In his distorted reality, the house on Maple Street was meant to be their future home together. I think often about that envelope we found, about how walls that seem solid can hide secrets. about how Sarah might have moved into that house, never knowing who had been watching her, who had stood inside those rooms imagining a future with her. Sometimes I wonder what else remains hidden in the spaces we don't see, in the houses we believe are empty when we're not there. The renovation of the Caldwell house was never completed. Sarah sold it as soon as the investigation allowed. I heard she moved to another state entirely. As for me, I still do renovations, but something has changed. Now, whenever I open a wall, I pause just for a moment and listen to the silence of the space revealed, wondering what secrets might have been hidden there, what stories the house has kept to itself, waiting for someone to find them. Sometimes I could swear I hear the houses breathe. Story 10. The town never mentioned the house at the edge of the woods. It stood alone, its windows blackened, its porch sagging under the weight of years. No one claimed to own it. No one could remember who built it. But when a group of hikers wandered too close, they saw something strange, names carved into the wooden siding, etched deep like warnings. At the bottom of the list, fresh and unweathered, was a name none of them recognized, until one of them whispered, voice trembling, "That's mine." The call came in during the night. Dispatch recorded it as a standard trespassing report. The voice on the line belonged to Mason Wright, the lead hiker who discovered his name carved into the abandoned house. The responding officers expected nothing more than teenage vandalism, perhaps a prank among friends. What they found instead defied explanation. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as darkness enveloped the forest. The beam of her flashlight cut through the shadows, illuminating the weathered facade of the structure. The names 27 in total ran vertically down the eastern wall. Some had faded with age, nearly invisible against the gray wood. Others remained sharp, as if carved recently. And at the bottom, Mason Wright, the cut still bearing traces of fresh sawdust. "I've never been here before," Mason insisted, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I don't understand how anyone would know my name." The investigation began with background checks on every name listed. The results chilled the detective team to their core. Each name belonged to someone reported missing over the past 4 decades. Some cases had gone cold, others remained active. All shared one disturbing detail: the individuals had disappeared while hiking alone. Forensic analysts photographed each carving, noting the varying depths, techniques, and weathering patterns. The oldest name, Rebecca Hansen, corresponded to a missing persons case from 37 years prior. The case notes described a young woman who ventured into these woods and never returned. Search parties found nothing but a single hiking boot beside a stream. Detective Keller interviewed Mason extensively. His story remained consistent. He had no connection to the area beyond this hiking trip with 4 college friends. They had chosen the trail randomly, based on an online recommendation. Nothing about his background linked him to any of the other names on the wall. The investigation shifted focus to Mason's companions. Emily Chen, the group photographer, provided pictures taken throughout their hike. In reviewing the images, analysts noticed something disturbing. A blurred figure appeared in the background of 3 separate photos. The shape resembled a tall, thin man, always partially obscured by trees. "We never saw anyone else on the trail," Emily insisted. "We would have remembered." Detective Keller ordered a search of the house interior. The structure appeared abandoned. Dust covered every surface. Furniture lay broken and scattered. Yet in the basement, officers discovered a disturbing scene. Personal items belonging to the missing hikers sat arranged in neat rows on wooden shelves. Watches, backpacks, cameras, wallets, each labeled with a corresponding name from the wall outside. The evidence technicians worked methodically, documenting every item. Under ultraviolet light, Blood patterns emerged on the concrete floor, years of stains that someone had attempted to clean. Ground-penetrating radar revealed no bodies buried beneath the house, yet cadaver dogs alerted repeatedly near the back of the property where the forest grew densest. As the investigation intensified, Detective Keller noticed unusual behavior from Mason Wright. He began reporting strange occurrences, whispers outside his apartment, footprints in fresh snow leading to his door but not away, figures watching from the street. The department assigned an officer to protect him, but Mason grew increasingly paranoid. The breakthrough came when researchers discovered land records buried in county archives. The house had belonged to a reclusive hunter named Victor Blackwood. Neighbors rarely saw him, describing brief encounters with an unnervingly tall, gaunt man who avoided conversation. Blackwood disappeared without trace 15 years ago, his disappearance never officially investigated. Detective Keller obtained a warrant to search deeper into the surrounding forest. The search team discovered a network of crude hunting blinds strategically positioned along popular hiking paths. Inside one, they found a journal containing meticulous observations, descriptions of hikers, their routes, equipment, and patterns. The handwriting matched samples from Victor Blackwood's few existing documents. The journal entries grew increasingly disturbing over time. Early pages detailed hunting techniques for animals. Later entries described humans as prey, their habits, vulnerabilities, and methods for their collection. The final pages contained detailed accounts of stalking each victim on the wall, including elaborate descriptions of how he selected his targets. The manhunt for Blackwood mobilized across multiple jurisdictions. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scanned the forest. Tactical teams methodically searched every cave and ravine, yet no trace of the suspect emerged. Mason Wright stopped answering his phone. Officers dispatched to his apartment found the door unlocked, the rooms empty. On his bedroom wall, freshly carved, was a single line: "The hunter becomes the hunted." The search for Mason continued for weeks without success. Then, during a secondary sweep of Blackwood's house, forensic technicians made a horrifying discovery. Hidden behind a false wall in the basement, they found a small workshop containing woodworking tools, jars of wood preservatives, and a freshly carved piece of wood bearing a new name not yet mounted to the exterior wall. Detective Keller recognized the name instantly. It belonged to the lead forensic technician who had processed the house during the initial investigation. The technician had called in sick that morning and couldn't be reached by phone. Authorities established a continuous surveillance perimeter around the house. Camera systems recorded every approach. Motion sensors monitored for intrusions. The trap was set. 3 nights later, sensors triggered an alert. Security footage captured a figure emerging from the forest, impossibly tall and thin, moving with unnatural grace. The figure approached the house directly, seemingly unconcerned about the surveillance. As tactical teams closed in, the cameras briefly lost connection. When the system recovered, the figure had vanished. The house remains under constant surveillance today. Mason Wright and the forensic technician were never found. The investigation continues, with new resources allocated as similar disappearances are reported in other forested regions. The names on the wall have become legendary among criminal investigators. Some officers refuse to speak them aloud, others avoid the case entirely. And local hikers now give the house a wide berth, afraid that speaking of it might somehow add their names to that terrible list, the names no one speaks. Story 11. In the quiet stillness of an abandoned house, a phone sat on the kitchen counter, its screen softly aglow. Detective Morgan Reed found herself captivated by the mystery it held, a mystery that defied logic and reason. The phone had made a call just moments before, a call that shouldn't have been possible. The voice on the other end belonged to Catherine Sullivan, a woman who had passed away years ago in a tragic car accident. Her words, whispered in desperation, echoed in Morgan's mind, haunting her with their impossible existence. As Morgan delved deeper into the case, she uncovered a journal that revealed a chilling tale of control, isolation, and fear in Catherine's relationship with her boyfriend, Mark. The journal hinted at a darkness lurking beneath the surface, a darkness that ultimately led to Catherine's untimely demise. But the true horror emerged when forensic evidence pointed to foul play in Catherine's death. It wasn't just a car accident, it was a carefully orchestrated crime, with Mark at the center of it all. As the investigation unfolded, more sinister truths came to light. Mark had manipulated evidence, created false alibis, and even manufactured a ghostly phone call to throw off suspicion. But in the end, justice prevailed, and Mark was held accountable for his heinous actions. The phone from the abandoned house now sits as a silent witness to the horrors that unfolded within its walls. Though its battery has long been removed, whispers of its phantom ring still seem to linger in the air, a chilling reminder of the voice that refused to be silenced. Catherine's story is not just a ghost tale, it is a testament to the resilience of victims, the power of truth, and the unwavering dedication of those who seek justice in the face of darkness. And as the phone rests in the evidence locker, its presence is a solemn reminder that even in death, voices will find a way to be heard. Story 12, the apartment lay silent and untouched for months, a forgotten space waiting to reveal its secrets to the new tenants who ventured inside. Their expectations were low as they crossed the threshold, perhaps just dust settling on abandoned furniture. Yet one door resisted their gentle nudges, a stubborn barrier to the unknown. It stood locked from within, guarding its mysteries with quiet determination. When the landlord finally coerced the door open, the tenants braced themselves for mundane discoveries, a pile of old coats or discarded knickknacks. However, what greeted them was far from ordinary. The walls bore witness to a silent struggle, etched with deep, uneven scratches that spoke of desperation and confinement. In the dim corner, an ancient flip phone lay dormant, its screen still illuminated by a single unread message. Detective Morgan Shaw, a seasoned investigator of the inexplicable, felt a chill creep down her spine at the sight before her. It wasn't the presence of blood or violence that unsettled her, but rather the haunting implications of those frantic scratch marks, a silent plea for freedom, a battle against unseen forces. "We need forensics here immediately," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently captured the eerie scene with his camera, "and gather all records of the previous tenants." The message on the forgotten phone whispered ominous words, "I know what you did." The landlord, a nervous figure with perpetually clammy hands, stuttered out a tale of the previous tenant's abrupt departure, leaving unpaid rent behind. A young woman kept to herself, left without a trace about 6 months ago, he muttered, his gaze skirting nervously past the locked closet. Forensic analysis uncovered a haunting truth: bloodstains mingled with the scratch marks, most belonging to a single individual, presumably the missing tenant, Emma Caldwell. However, 2 distinct DNA profiles emerged, one unidentified, the other belonging to a man supposedly deceased for years. Shaw furrowed her brow in disbelief as she scrutinized the perplexing lab results. Derek Mercer, a convicted criminal long thought dead, now left his genetic imprint on the walls of Emma's prison. The pieces of the puzzle refused to fit neatly together, defying logic and reason. Emma's apartment whispered a tale of interrupted existence, a life halted in its tracks, leaving behind unfinished coffee mugs and unanswered phone calls. A pattern of silence emerged in her communication, punctuated by mysterious calls from an unknown number in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. The sister mentioned a new boyfriend, Officer Reed reported. No name, just described as intense and private. Surveillance footage unveiled a shadowy figure entering Emma's sanctuary under cover of night, a man obscured by a baseball cap, his identity shrouded in secrecy. The revelation of partial fingerprints belonging to the supposedly deceased Derek Mercer on the closet's doorknob offered a haunting glimpse into the past. He staged his death, Shaw concluded with a heavy heart. But why and what connection does he hold to Emma? The enigmatic DNA sample led them down a dark path, intertwining Emma's fate with another missing soul. Lynette Porter, vanished without a trace, found a twisted link to Emma through the shadows of the past. As the investigation unfolded, a chilling narrative emerged: Derek Mercer's sinister game of control and manipulation, his victims mere pawns in a macabre play of dominance and submission. The manhunt for Mercer spanned jurisdictions, a race against time to prevent further suffering at his hands. Forensic psychologists delved into the depths of his twisted psyche, uncovering a darkness that defied comprehension. When Mercer was finally apprehended, a calm facade masked his inner turmoil. His words dripped with malice as he spun a web of deceit, attempting to justify his monstrous actions. The trial exposed the intricate web of lies Mercer had woven, his elaborate facade crumbling under the weight of undeniable evidence. Emma's body remained a haunting specter, lost to the confines of that unforgiving closet, her final message a poignant plea for justice. The courtroom echoed with the weight of verdicts rendered, condemning Mercer to a lifetime behind bars. His stoic demeanor betrayed a twisted satisfaction, a private victory in a game known only to him. Lynette Porter, survivor of Mercer's depravity, stood tall in the face of darkness, her voice a beacon of resilience against the shadows that once threatened to consume her. The case left an indelible mark on Detective Shaw, a reminder of the unseen horrors that lurked behind closed doors. The closet door from Emma's apartment found a new home in her office, a symbol of survival against insurmountable odds, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Story 13, in the midst of renovations, the unexpected often reveals itself, hidden treasures from the past waiting to be unearthed. For Sarah and Michael, the uncovering of a mysterious letter beneath the floorboards of their newly acquired Victorian-era home was a twist they never saw coming. The old paper, fragile and faded, bore a cryptic warning: "Don't trust the one who knocked." Before they could process the eerie message, the sound of 3 sharp knocks reverberated through the silent house, sending shivers down their spines. Detective Alina Reed, with her seasoned partner, delved into the unfolding enigma. The couple's faces mirrored genuine fear as they recounted the unsettling events. Sarah and Michael, innocent in the eyes of background checks, stood bewildered as Reed pieced together the haunting history of their home. Once belonging to the Hargrove family, the house had harbored secrets for years, especially following the passing of the reclusive widow, Margaret Hargrove. Forensic analysis of the aged note hinted at a tale of fear and urgency, potentially linked to Margaret's late husband, Franklin. As Reed delved deeper, uncovering the threads of the past, a chilling narrative began to take shape. Franklin, once a respected teacher turned recluse, had fallen into the clutches of gambling debts and a shadowy figure known as the collector Victor Mercer. Mercer's sudden disappearance 2 decades prior added a layer of intrigue to the unfolding mystery. Margaret's sister, now residing in a nursing home, whispered of Franklin's debts and the ominous 3 knocks that plagued their lives. As the investigation progressed, hidden truths emerged from the shadows, leading Reed and her team to a grim discovery buried beneath the house's foundation. The skeletal remains of Victor Mercer, a victim of Franklin's desperate actions, brought closure to a long puzzling case. Margaret's diaries, a window into her tortured soul, shed light on the harrowing events that unfolded within the walls of the old house. The echoes of the past lingered, haunting the empty halls as Sarah and Michael made the difficult decision to part ways with their tainted abode. The house stood silent, its secrets locked within, a testament to the chilling legacy of those who had once dwelled there. And so, the tale of the house on the hill faded into local lore, whispered rumors of ghostly knocks in the dead of night keeping the curious at bay. Detective Reed, in her final report, mused on the enigmatic nature of unsolved mysteries, where truth and shadows intertwine, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions. Story 14. She entered through the front door, dust swirling in the stagnant air. The house had sat abandoned for years, its walls shedding paint, its furniture shrouded in sheets. Moving through it felt like stepping into a suspended moment in time except for one peculiar detail. The doors, each one she opened, led back to the same room. Regardless of her path, regardless of the handle she turned, she always found herself back in the parlor. The sole escape route was the way she had entered. But upon turning back, the front door had vanished. The discovery of Morgan Pierce's lifeless form altered the deserted Victorian from a local enigma to a crime site. Detective Sarah Lind stood at the threshold, observing forensic experts glide through the dim interior like phantoms. This residence had gained a certain infamy among the townsfolk, the house where compasses spun wildly, where people reported sensing an unseen presence. Now it concealed secrets far more sinister than mere urban myths. Initial assessment indicates she's been deceased for approximately 3 days, the medical examiner murmured. The cause of death seems to be asphyxiation. Morgan had been discovered seated in an antique chair in the parlor, her posture serene, hands folded neatly in her lap as if anticipating someone's arrival. No signs of struggle, no marks of defense. The scene exuded a disquieting stillness that even seasoned investigators found unnerving. "Who reported the discovery of the body?" Lind inquired, scanning her notes. "A real estate agent showing the property to potential buyers," her partner replied. They entered, spotted her sitting there, initially mistook her for a trespasser until they drew nearer. The house had remained unoccupied since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, nearly 5 years earlier. Legal disputes had left the property in a state of limbo, unwanted, unsold, and largely forgotten, except by vandals and thrill seekers. Morgan Pierce, aged 26, a graduate student delving into architectural anomalies for her thesis. Her friends portrayed her as meticulous, driven, and captivated by spaces that defied traditional design principles. The deserted Victorian, renowned for disorienting its visitors, would have presented an irresistible allure to her. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days ago, Lind noted. Morgan mentioned visiting the house where people get lost for her research. The investigation unveiled that Morgan had frequented the house multiple times in the weeks preceding her demise. Her journal entries chronicled peculiar acoustic phenomena, unexpected pockets of cold, and doors that seemingly led to different rooms with each opening. In her final entry, she spoke of bringing specialized equipment to record what she termed spatial anomalies. However, this equipment was nowhere to be found. The post-mortem examination divulged an unforeseen detail traces of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, derived from a plant utilized in specific shamanic ceremonies. While this substance could induce disorientation and vivid hallucinations, the quantities detected were not lethal. She wasn't one to engage in recreational drug use, her boyfriend stressed during interrogation. Morgan was meticulous about her research methodologies. She wouldn't have willingly distorted her perception. Digital forensics uncovered shreds of deleted messages on Morgan's phone, conversations with an individual who shared her fascination with the house, someone who professed to comprehend its enigmas. The exchanges grew progressively intimate and enigmatic. The house retains memories of its past, one message conveyed. It yearns for someone to acknowledge them. The investigation guided detectives to Adam Reeves, an architectural historian who had corresponded with Morgan. His expertise in rare spatial phenomena had captured her interest, and their professional association had developed into a more personal connection. When questioned, Reeves appeared genuinely shattered by her demise. The house holds a reputation, he elucidated. The original architect integrated optical illusions and false perspectives. He fashioned it to bewilder and disorient. Morgan believed there was a deeper layer to it, something transcending mere design tricks. Nonetheless, Reeves provided an alibi for the estimated time of Morgan's passing. Surveillance footage depicted him delivering a lecture at a university symposium several hours away. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source: Alina Blackwood's grandson, now residing overseas. Upon being contacted by investigators, he disclosed a family secret suppressed for generations. "My grandmother wasn't the sole Blackwood to perish in that house," he disclosed. "There were others, always discovered in the parlor, always appearing tranquil. The family termed it the claiming." He furnished investigators with journals dating back decades, chronicling deaths initially attributed to cardiac arrest or stroke. The pattern was glaring: individuals spending prolonged periods in the house inevitably succumbed to what the family euphemistically dubbed the influence. A secondary sweep of the property unveiled a concealed compartment behind the parlor fireplace. Inside, investigators unearthed Morgan's missing equipment and something more. A small chamber housing artifacts from diverse indigenous cultures, arranged in a meticulous geometric layout. At the center rested a sculpted figurine, its features worn smooth by generations of handling. Examination confirmed the figurine as depicting a deity linked with liminal spaces, boundaries between realms. Residues on the artifacts matched the alkaloid discovered in Morgan's system. The case took a new twist when forensic scrutiny of dust patterns in the house hinted at another presence during Morgan's demise. Partial fingerprints, divergent from Morgan's or those of any known visitors, were retrieved from doorknobs throughout the residence. 3 weeks into the investigation, Adam Reeves was found lifeless in his apartment. Mirroring Morgan, he was seated facing the entrance, a tranquil expression on his countenance, with the same alkaloid present in his system. Clutched in his hand was a key that corresponded to no lock in his apartment, but snugly fit the concealed compartment in the Victorian. In his final email sent to himself as if preserving a testament, Reeves inscribed, "The house does not ensnare you physically, it entraps your perception. Morgan was correct, the doors led where they always have, yet something deceives you into believing you're retracing your steps. Once you grasp the truth, you can depart at any moment, but by then, you no longer desire to. The case remains officially unresolved, categorized as suspicious fatalities under scrutiny. The Victorian has since been condemned, access regulated by authorities. However, whispers persist of lights glimpsed within on certain nights, and of visitors who enter but never emerge. Some locals assert the house seizes those who comprehend its enigmas too deeply. Others contend that Morgan and Reeves unearthed something potent and ancient, something that inhabits the interstices between conventional reality. The veracity remains as elusive as an exit in a house where every door circles back to the beginning. Story 15: The Enigmatic Manor. The new owners brushed off the crackling of the vintage intercom system in their Victorian manner as a quaint peculiarity of the past. A forgotten relic with a mysterious charm, it crackled softly in the stillness of the night, its static-filled whispers barely audible. Daniel and Meredith Parker, enamored by the history woven into the walls of their home, found solace in the nostalgia of the old intercom system that connected every room. One fateful night, curiosity got the best of Daniel. He pressed the button, and a chilling whisper reverberated through the speaker, sending shivers down his spine. "Why did you come back?" the eerie voice questioned. Startled, Daniel recoiled, his hands trembling in the dimly lit hallway. His wife, standing behind him, denied ever uttering those words, her voice barely above a whisper. The manor, nestled amidst ancient oak trees, exuded an air of mystery, with its weathered facade hiding a modernized interior. The Parkers had acquired the property at an unexpectedly low price, the real estate agent's unease during the viewing adding a layer of intrigue to their purchase. The intercom system, a charming feature from a bygone era, had captivated the couple with its historical allure. Detective Sarah Reeves, responding to a call about a potential break-in at the manor, sensed there was more to the story than met the eye. Gravel crunched under the tires of her unmarked car as she arrived at the property, greeted by the pale figure of Daniel at the door. His recount of the strange occurrences involving the intercom piqued her interest, leading her through the grand foyer into the heart of the enigmatic manor. In the living room, Meredith sat rigid on an antique sofa, her hands tightly clutching a steaming mug she dared not touch. Without preamble, she revealed a startling discovery made behind a wall in the kitchen pantry. As Daniel had begun renovations, a hidden compartment yielded a weathered journal wrapped in decaying plastic, its pages fragile with age and secrets. Detective Reeves, gloved hands carefully turning the brittle pages, uncovered the poignant writings of Alina, the journal's author and previous inhabitant of the manor. Alina's elegant yet frantic script detailed her fears of her husband Vincent's sinister intentions, culminating in a final entry dated 3 decades prior. The mystery of Alina's disappearance unraveled before their eyes, casting a shadow over the manor's dark past. Vincent and Alina Blackwood, the previous owners of the house, were at the center of a haunting tale of betrayal and deceit. Vincent's twisted web of lies unraveled as forensic analysis revealed the chilling truth buried beneath the garden shed. The skeletal remains of a woman, bearing signs of violence, whispered of a tragic fate sealed in secrecy for years. Vincent Blackwood, now aged and residing in a care facility, confessed to the murder of his wife, Alina. His chilling admission painted a picture of a man driven to silence the incessant voice of his wife, forever echoing through the intercom system she had rewired to connect their souls across time and space. The trial brought closure, but the scars of the house's dark history lingered. Daniel and Meredith, unable to bear the weight of the manor's grim past, sold the house, leaving behind the echoes of Aliner's unspoken truth. Before parting ways, they honored Aliner with a solemn memorial in the garden, a gesture of peace for a soul lost to the shadows of the past. The intercom system, once a conduit for whispers from beyond, was removed by the new owners during renovations, silencing the spectral echoes that haunted the corridors. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file one final time, the manila folder closing on a chapter of justice served. As she drove past the manor on her way home, a sense of quiet reverence filled the air. Though she never stopped, she slowed down, the window cracked open ever so slightly, listening for the faint whispers carried on the evening breeze, a reminder of the house that answered back, revealing its secrets to those who dared to listen. Story 16. In the stillness of the night, a faint flicker danced on the baby monitor screen, like a secret trying to break free. At first, the mother brushed it off as a glitch, a mere hiccup in the technology. But then the crackle of static filled the room, and a soft voice, barely audible, whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill crept down her spine, her heart quickening with unease. With trembling hands, she hurried to her son's room, each step echoing in the silent house. Upon reaching the nursery, her worst fears materialized. Her son's crib stood empty, devoid of the sweet, slumbering form she had tucked in just hours before. Panic seized her, her breath catching in her throat as she scanned the room frantically. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only anomaly was the plush rabbit lying on the floor, its glossy eyes fixed on her, as though witnessing the unfolding mystery. In a frenzy of fear and disbelief, she screamed until her voice grew hoarse, the sound piercing the night and reaching the ears of concerned neighbors. Emergency services were summoned, their arrival marking the beginning of a haunting ordeal. The mother, named Rebecca, sat on the nursery floor, clutching the stuffed rabbit to her chest, her eyes wide with terror as she rocked back and forth in a trance-like state. Samuel, her 4-month-old infant, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that no amount of searching could fill. The investigators grappled with the baffling case, no signs of forced entry, no alarms triggered, only the haunting memory of that whispered command from the shadows. Suspicion fell upon Rebecca, her demeanor scrutinized for any hint of guilt. Her husband, Daniel, was absent during the ordeal, away on business, adding a layer of complexity to the already murky narrative of their strained marriage and the shadows of postpartum struggles that lingered in the background. As the investigation unfolded, a glimmer of hope emerged, a breakthrough in the form of microscopic fibers discovered on the nursery windowsill, foreign to the household and pointing to an intruder skilled in the art of stealth. The focus shifted to the possibility of an outside entry, a theory supported by security footage capturing a mysterious figure lurking in the darkness of that fateful night. Daniel, upon his return, found himself under the scrutiny of suspicion, his newfound hobby of rock climbing raising eyebrows among the detectives. Clues began to align: a life insurance policy taken out on Samuel, secretive calls to an unknown number, and a web of deceit that entangled multiple lives in a web of betrayal. The truth unraveled like a sinister tapestry, revealing hidden connections and a web of lies that spanned years. It was Elaine, Daniel's first wife with a shattered past, who emerged from the shadows as the orchestrator of the abduction, driven by a grief that had festered into a twisted obsession. Her eyes held a vacant sorrow as she was apprehended, her actions stemming from a heartache that knew no bounds. In the courtroom, the air was heavy with the weight of betrayal and deceit as the evidence unfolded: a hacked baby monitor, encrypted messages, and a chilling audio recording that exposed the darkest depths of human greed. Daniel's cough, a telltale echo in the background, sealed his fate as the mastermind behind the orchestrated crime that shattered lives and tore apart families. Justice, though delayed, found its mark as Daniel and Elaine faced the consequences of their heinous actions. Rebecca and Samuel, scarred but resilient, sought solace in a new beginning, far from the shadows of the past that threatened to engulf them. As the years passed, the echoes of that fateful night faded into memory, but the legacy of the baby monitor lingered, a reminder of how technology could be both a guardian and a betrayer, capturing truths that lay hidden in the whispers of the night. Samuel grew up shielded from the darkness that once enveloped him, while Rebecca kept the stuffed rabbit as a silent sentinel, a testament to the innocence lost and the resilience found in the aftermath of a nightmare turned reality. The monitor's silent vigil continued, a silent witness to the unraveling of a tale that defied logic and left scars that time could never fully erase. Story 17, the apartment exuded an air of age, its walls whispering stories of bygone days. The heating system let out a low groan, the pipes rattled softly sounds that had become part of the building's character. She thought nothing of it, attributing the noises to the building's history. Yet one night a faint voice drifted through the vents, catching her attention. It wasn't the usual distant chatter of neighbors. This was different. It was a whisper, calling out her name in the stillness of the night. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, she leaned in closer, pressing her ear against the old grate, feeling a chill brush past her cheek. And then, almost teasingly, the voice spoke again. "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw found herself at the heart of a vacant apartment, a sense of mystery hanging heavy in the air. Her eyes fixated on the rusted vent cover that had been forcibly removed. The forensics team meticulously combed through the scene, capturing every detail with their cameras. The missing woman, Alina Reeves, had vanished without a trace until a foul odor led to the grim discovery. What awaited them inside the ventilation system defied logic. Officer Patel recounted Alina's claims of hearing voices through the vents, dismissed as quirks of an old building by the management. But Shaw, crouched by the vent, noticed the telltale signs of struggle around its edges. Deep scratches etched into the metal, as if someone had desperately tried to break free from within. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. Alina, a beloved kindergarten teacher with a green thumb, was known for her kindness and warmth. Her sudden disappearance had sent ripples of concern through her community. Shaw learned from Alina's sister of her growing paranoia, of feeling watched and spoken to through the very walls of her own home. A sense of unease settled over Shaw as she surveyed the apartment, piecing together the fragments of Alina's final days. The forensics team uncovered peculiar evidence, a match between fibers in the vent and Alina's cardigan, a foreign fingerprint on the vent cover, and haunting audio recordings from Alina's phone. Alone in her car, rain pattering against the roof, Shaw listened to the recordings, each one a chilling testament to Alina's ordeal. The whispers, the pleas for entry, echoed in the confines of the car, sending a chill down Shaw's spine. The history of the building revealed a dark underbelly. Previous tenants had fled, citing strange occurrences within the walls. One had even suffered hallucinations of voices beckoning from the vents. Harold Weber, the stoic building superintendent, evoked suspicion with his nonchalant demeanor. But as Shaw delved deeper, she sensed a hidden truth lurking beneath Weber's facade. A hidden access panel in Alina's bathroom unveiled a secret passage snaking through the walls, granting access to the building's ventilation system. Inside, remnants of a clandestine existence emerged: a flashlight, food wrappers, signs of a presence long concealed. Shaw's instincts led her to Weber's meticulously kept apartment, a facade of normalcy shattered by the contents of his computer. Folders meticulously organized by apartment numbers revealed a chilling obsession. Recordings, photographs, and journals chronicled Weber's twisted connection to his victims. The depths of his depravity unfurled with each piece of evidence, leading to a storage unit brimming with mementos of lives he had invaded. Shaw's stomach churned at the realization of the horrors lurking beneath the surface. Weber's arrest brought a semblance of closure, yet the scars of his actions ran deep. Eliner's fate painted a harrowing picture of a life snuffed out by a predator lurking in the shadows. Families of former tenants stepped forward, each with a tale of paranoia, of voices that whispered from the walls, driving their loved ones to the brink. In court, Weber's facade cracked, revealing a man consumed by his delusions. His calm demeanor masked a darkness that seeped through his very being. The jury's swift verdict echoed through the courtroom, sealing Weber's fate. As he was led away, a chilling smile played on his lips, a whisper of impending darkness lingering in the air. The once haunted apartment building now stands empty, a silent witness to the horrors that unfolded within its walls. Despite attempts at renewal, a sense of unease lingers, a reminder of the whispers that still echo through the vents, the cold drafts that carry unseen voices. The building breathes, its aging infrastructure groaning and rattling, a testament to the secrets it holds. Residents come and go, but the stories whispered within its walls endure, a haunting legacy of a past that refuses to be forgotten. Story 18. In the dimly lit attic, tucked beneath a worn blanket, they stumbled upon a porcelain doll of exquisite craftsmanship. Its antique features frozen in time, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to follow their every move. Sarah and Michael, a young couple drawn to the allure of a Victorian house with a haunting past, brushed off the doll as just another forgotten relic of yesteryear. But that night, as they drifted off to sleep, a subtle unease settled in the air. The silence grew heavy, almost palpable, and when morning light filtered through the window, the doll was no longer nestled in the attic's shadows. Instead, it sat ominously at the foot of their bed, a silent sentinel watching over them. Detective Rachel Winters, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail, was called to the scene on a crisp autumn morning. The master bedroom revealed a chilling tableau. The female victim posed unnaturally, her eyes wide with fear, while the male victim lay in the hallway, frozen in a futile attempt to escape an unknown horror. As Detective Winters meticulously surveyed the crime scene, a sense of foreboding crept over her. The positioning of the victims was deliberate, almost ritualistic. It reminded her of a doll plucked from a macabre display, a puppet in a twisted game of fate. The investigation unfolded like a dark tapestry woven with threads of mystery and dread. Neighbors whispered of strange sightings, a shadow flitting past a window, eerie laughter echoing through the empty house. Forensic analysis uncovered traces of vintage fabrics, reminiscent of antique doll clothing, scattered throughout the house, especially concentrated in the attic where the couple had met their tragic end. But the most perplexing revelation came from the house's troubled history. Previous owners had met untimely deaths under inexplicable circumstances, each shrouded in a veil of unanswered questions. A common thread emerged: a connection to the attic space where Sarah and Michael had dared to venture with their plans for renovation. Delving deeper into the past, Detective Winters unearthed a chilling tale of a doll maker and his daughter, bound by tragedy and dark secrets. The final creation of the doll maker, a perfect replica of his lost child, bore an uncanny resemblance to the doll found in the attic. Old photographs hinted at a sinister truth. The doll possessed an otherworldly presence, shifting positions in a ghostly dance captured on film. In a twist of fate, a distant relative of the doll maker revealed whispers of arcane rituals and forbidden knowledge, hinting at a dark pact that infused the dolls with a life of their own. The line between reality and nightmare blurred as the investigation spiraled into the realm of the supernatural. And then a peculiar turn of events unfolded. The doll vanished from police custody, as if slipping through the cracks of reality itself. Detective Winters, her memory clouded by a mysterious fog, found herself at a loss for answers. The truth remained elusive, slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. The house, tainted by a legacy of tragedy, changed hands once more, its secrets buried beneath layers of dust and time. The attic lay barren, a silent witness to the enigmatic forces that lingered within its walls. And as the new owners settled in, whispers of a spectral presence danced on the edges of their consciousness, a reminder of the unseen forces that dwelled in the shadows. Detective Winters, haunted by the echoes of the past, retired into obscurity, carrying with her a single photograph that held the key to a mystery that defied logic. Locked away in a vault of secrets, it remained a silent witness to the chilling legacy of the doll maker and his creations. And so the tale faded into whispers and shadows, a ghostly reminder of a bygone era when dolls held secrets, and the line between the living and the dead blurred into a haunting melody that echoed through the corridors of time. Story 19. The inn stood as a relic of the past, a place transient souls passed through, leaving behind whispers of their presence. The key exchanged hands with a peculiar weight, the clerk's warning hanging in the air like a shroud of mystery. Remember, avoid the final door on the left, his words barely audible, laden with a cryptic unease. Intrigue tugged at her, a relentless curiosity beckoning her towards the forbidden threshold. That night, in the hushed embrace of the dim corridors, she found herself standing before it, the handle sending shivers down her spine with its icy touch. To the casual observer, the door bore no distinction from its companions until she pressed her ear against its surface. A soft, rhythmic breath brushed against her, a presence lingering on the other side, veiled in obscurity. Detective Morgan Reed emerged from the haze of slumber, stepping beneath the tape that cordoned off the crime scene, a realm tainted by the lingering scent of iron and despair. The room bore witness to a macabre spectacle. While the bathroom gleamed untouched, the bed lay undisturbed, a stark contrast to the grim tableau that unfolded between them. A young woman lay sprawled on the floor, her golden locks fanning out like a halo, her vacant gaze fixed upon the ceiling, a silent witness to the horrors of the night. Reed knelt beside her, a solemn reverence in her movements, mindful not to disrupt the silent narrative woven by the evidence markers that punctuated the scene. The third within this season, remarked the forensic technician, his voice devoid of emotion, as he captured the scene in haunting stillness through the lens of his camera. A familiar signature binds them. Reed offered a silent nod, absorbing the gravity of the situation. The victim adorned in finery, a stark contrast to the humble setting of the forgotten inn, her designer handbag lying open, its contents untouched, dispelling the notion of a robbery gone awry. A different motive fueled this tragedy. The hotel manager lingered in the shadows, his pallor betraying his distress. She arrived alone, paid in cash. I never anticipated, his voice faltered, the weight of the truth settling upon him. It was the maid who discovered her fate. Reed surveyed the room anew, searching for clues amidst the absence of forced entry, the lack of defensive wounds on the victim's form. It was a dance of familiarity between the victim and her assailant, a shared secret that led to this fateful encounter. Back at the precinct, Reed pinned photographs to the board, a visual chronicle of tragedy unfolding in the shadows of anonymity. Three women linked by a haunting resemblance, each discovered in obscure motels that whispered of forgotten tales. The press stirred with inquiries, rumors of a predator lurking in the shadows of the community. The autopsy findings have arrived, Detective Hayes announced, laying a folder before Reed. Death by strangulation, manual, no trace of DNA beneath her nails. No signs of a violation, Reed furrowed her brow. This was not a crime of opportunity, but a deliberate act woven with threads of intimacy and betrayal. Days melded into nights as the investigation deepened, the hotel's surveillance offering no solace in unraveling the enigma. The victim, identified as Elaine Werner, a meticulous financial analyst, bore no visible enmity towards her unknown adversary. Her circle painted her as cautious, methodical, a puzzle piece incongruent with her chosen sanctuary. A breakthrough surfaced during Reed's conversation with Werner's sister. She spoke of a man from her workplace, the sister disclosed, hands trembling around her cup of coffee. A man of complexity, shrouded in secrecy. I suspect he was married. Reed leaned in, her gaze intent. Did she disclose a name? Only referred to him as C, that was all she divulged. The focus shifted to Werner's professional domain, where colleagues painted a portrait of a reserved professional, shielding her private life from prying eyes. However, a hidden gem awaited within Werner's desk, a business card bearing the name Charles Emerson, Senior Vice President. Emerson exuded an air of composure during the interrogation, his facade meticulously crafted, his alibi a fortress of certitude. Yet a flicker of unease danced within his gaze as Reed probed. "Did your interactions with Elaine extend beyond the workplace?" she inquired casually. A fleeting shadow crossed Emerson's features, a crack in his polished veneer. "Purely professional," he asserted. In the weeks that followed, forensic evidence intertwined Emerson with Werner's demise, his narrative unraveling in the face of mounting proof. "We shared an association," he confessed, "but I terminated it. She threatened to disrupt my life, sufficient to extinguish hers." Reed's voice held a steely edge, piercing through the veil of deceit. Emerson's denial crumbled beneath the weight of evidence, a credit card trail leading to the adjacent room, a clandestine camera concealed within the walls, capturing moments that sealed the victim's fate. Fibers from his tailored suit linked him to the crime scene, his DNA imprinting the room with his nefarious presence. The digital realm revealed a trove of recordings, mirroring the demise of past victims, each a haunting echo of his fractured soul. The pattern emerged, a twisted dance orchestrated by Emerson, luring women akin to his wife in their youthful guise, only to erase them from existence once his dark desires were sated. In the confines of the interrogation chamber, Emerson's facade crumbled, revealing the abyss that dwelled within a void devoid of empathy, a heart consumed by selfish ambition. The trial unfolded in a blaze of scrutiny, three families finding closure as justice was meted out in the sterile confines of the courtroom. Emerson's stoic demeanor betrayed no remorse, his gaze a mask of indifference that had shielded him in the corporate realm. The gavel's final decree echoed through the chamber, condemning him to a life bereft of freedom. As Reed met Emerson's gaze one final time, a fleeting glimpse behind his mask unveiled not remorse or regret, but a chilling emptiness and absence of humanity that lingered in the shadows. The media christened it "The Door on the Left Saga," a tale that echoed through the annals of psychology and true crime lore. Yet for Reed, the echoes of that night reverberated through time, a reminder of the fragile boundary between innocence and malevolence. Sometimes in the quiet corridors of hotels, she found herself drawn to counting doors, pondering the enigmas that lay beyond. In the evidence vault, 3 hotel keys lay dormant, bearing silent witness to a tragedy that could never be erased, a stark reminder that some doors, once opened, led to a realm from which there was no return. Story 20, The Whispers of the Past. She had a desire to refresh the nursery before the little one's arrival. The walls donned a faded blue hue, a color that held within it a history of untold tales. With each stroke of white paint, a hidden message slowly emerged from beneath the layers, the words initially faint, then growing sharper and clearer. "Don't let it hear you." Her breath hitched as she took a step back, her eyes widening in disbelief. There, imprinted in the fresh paint, were tiny handprints, positioned too high for any child to reach. This eerie revelation within the nursery of the Morgan residence marked the genesis of what would later be known as the Whispering House case. The young couple had acquired the Victorian-style abode just months prior, lured by its seemingly unbelievable price tag. The realtor had only mentioned minor cosmetic issues, conveniently leaving out the darker history that lingered within the property's walls. Detective Sarah Klein arrived at the scene, her notebook clutched tightly in hand. The door swung open to reveal a woman, her belly swollen with child, adorned in paint-splattered overalls. Dark circles underscored her eyes, a testament to sleepless nights. The detective observed the quivering hands of the woman as she recounted the chilling discovery of the hidden message and handprints. The prior owners vanished overnight, the woman divulged. The neighbors claimed they left without a word, hastily packing essentials into their car. Detective Klein traversed the historic home, the aged floorboards creaking beneath her weight. Standing in the nursery, she inspected the partially painted wall, the cryptic message and ghostly handprints still visible where the paint job had been abandoned mid-process. Next to the message were 5 small handprints etched into the wet paint, positioned at the height of an adult's shoulders. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into property records. The house had changed ownership 8 times in 3 decades, an unusually high turnover rate. What sent shivers down her spine were the child welfare reports linked to 3 of those families. Children had spoken of whispers from the walls and of feeling watched as they slept. The detective delved deeper, unearthing construction documents and historical accounts. It was revealed that the house once belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a wealthy widow who had operated a small orphanage on the premises during the early industrial era. Newspaper clippings hinted at the disappearance of 5 children under her care, presumed to have run away. When Eleanor passed away, workers renovating the house stumbled upon a concealed chamber behind the nursery wall. Inside, they discovered remnants of children's lives, tiny shoes, toys, and clothing, but no traces of their bodies. The case had gone cold, buried in dusty archives. Detective Klein interviewed former residents, piecing together a disturbing narrative. Each family with children recounted peculiar incidents, toys rearranged overnight, echoes of childish laughter in empty corridors, and crayon drawings manifesting on walls. Most dismissed these occurrences as figments of imagination until the ominous message surfaced during nursery repaints. The handwriting, consistent across accounts, bore the same warning: don't let them find you. Don't make a sound, don't let it hear you. A forensic linguist analyzed the writing, linking it to Eleanor Blackwood's journals. But what chilled the detective to the core were the identical handprints, regardless of the different children who had resided in the home. The size and placement of the handprints remained unchanged over the decades. The investigation took a macabre turn when the detective persuaded the current homeowners to permit ground-penetrating radar scans in the basement. The results revealed anomalies, 5 distinct shapes beneath the concrete floor, each resembling a child's form. As the workers broke through the concrete, a grim truth was unearthed. 5 sets of child-sized remains lay arranged in a circle. Forensic analysis indicated that the children had met their demise during Aliner's occupancy of the house. Each child wore a pendant engraved with their name, the 5 orphans who had supposedly fled. In a bid to unveil more secrets, the detective ordered the nursery to be doused in luminol. In the dimness, handprints glowed on every surface, hidden beneath layers of paint unseen to the naked eye. Countless handprints varying in height as if the children had struggled to escape their confines. Aliner's journals, salvaged from county archives, exposed her twisted beliefs. She deemed orphaned children as vessels of spiritual power, intending to harness their vitality to prolong her own existence. The children had etched warnings into the walls, hoping that future occupants would uncover their tragic end. With the proper burial of the victims, justice was finally served, their names etched as murder victims rather than runaways. The house stood desolate thereafter, the expectant couple refusing to set foot on the premises, even to retrieve their possessions. Detective Klein compiled her final report, featuring photographs of the luminous handprints and the cryptic message beneath the paint. She acknowledged that while justice had been meted out for the initial victims, an inexplicable presence lingered within the house, reaching out through time and layers of paint. The nursery walls were demolished during renovations, yet workers attested to hearing children's whispers emanating from the rubble. None dared to return after dusk. The house was ultimately condemned, its mysteries consigned to a cold case file in a forgotten drawer, a closure on paper, but unanswered spiritual queries that persisted. The detective retained a photograph from the case, a haunting image of 5 luminol handprints glowing in the darkness, a poignant reminder that some crimes cast shadows that fresh coats of paint can never erase. Story 21, The Mystery of Reflections. She cleared the mist from the mirror, gazing at her own reflection. Yet a subtle unease crept in. Her appearance seemed normal, her attire unchanged. But with each passing moment, a sense of disquiet settled upon her. A flicker caught in the corner of her eye, a motion not of her own making. When she turned away, her reflection remained motionless, watching. That unsettling moment in her bathroom marked the beginning of Rebecca Thorne's enigmatic saga, one that would baffle investigators and linger in the community's consciousness for years. Residing in a modest apartment within a tranquil suburban setting, Rebecca led a solitary existence. Known to be meticulous and reserved, she maintained a polite distance from her neighbors while adhering to a structured routine. Her occupation as a data analyst for a medium-sized firm dictated her life with precision and regularity. No one could have foreseen that she would become the focal point of one of the most enigmatic criminal inquiries of the era. The initial signs were subtle. Objects in Rebecca's home seemed subtly rearranged, nothing missing, just shifted. A coffee mug relocated to a different shelf, books rearranged on the shelves, her toothbrush oddly placed on the opposite side of the sink. At first, she dismissed these occurrences as mere lapses in memory, a consequence of prolonged hours spent scrutinizing spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights, straining her eyes until reality blurred. It wasn't until weeks later, after a series of unsettling incidents, that Rebecca reached out to the authorities. Detective Marion Shaw received her report, initially deeming it a matter for mental health services rather than law enforcement. Documenting the complaint, Shaw filed it away with other non-urgent cases. There was no tangible evidence, Shaw later recounted. No signs of forced entry, no missing items, just a woman plagued by a sense of unease in her own home. The pivotal moment arrived with the incident involving the bathroom mirror. During her subsequent interaction with the police, Rebecca recounted the experience vividly, how her reflection appeared to move independently, how an eerie sensation of being observed overwhelmed her in solitude. This time she possessed proof, security footage captured by a camera she had installed, aimed at her front door. The footage unveiled a chilling revelation that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned officers. In the grainy video, Rebecca departed for work in the morning. Yet 20 minutes later, an identical figure to Rebecca entered her apartment using a key. Forensic experts scrutinized the footage, searching for signs of tampering or manipulation. To their astonishment, no evidence of foul play emerged. The individual entering mimicked Rebecca's movements, attire, and even carried her distinct leather bag. However, according to time-stamped records from her workplace security system, Rebecca had already checked into her office building across town. "We are facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superiors. "Someone who has meticulously studied Miss Thorne and can replicate her with eerie accuracy." As the investigation deepened, fingerprints found within Rebecca's residence exclusively matched her own. No foreign DNA was uncovered. Neighbors could provide no insights, merely recalling Rebecca's usual comings and goings. Mrs. Keller, a neighbor, mentioned a peculiar encounter where she greeted Rebecca upon her return home, receiving no response, a departure from Rebecca's customary behavior, yet not alarming. Rebecca commenced documenting the disturbances in a journal. Minor alterations within her home escalated. Unexplained food vanished from her refrigerator. Her computer displayed searches she had not conducted. Most unsettling were the photographs on her phone, self-portraits bearing her likeness, yet taken without her recollection. In some images, her expression appeared subtly awry, the smile too broad, the gaze too intense. "I feel as though I am descending into madness," she confessed to Detective Shaw during their third meeting. "Or perhaps someone is orchestrating this illusion to make me believe I am." A breakthrough occurred when investigators discerned a pattern in the security footage. The doppelganger only infiltrated when Rebecca departed for specific appointments, therapeutic sessions, yoga classes, Sunday morning grocery runs, predetermined activities with predictable durations. "An individual well acquainted with your routine," Shaw elucidated. "This is not random, it is a calculated surveillance and infiltration." A forensic psychologist posited that they were dealing with a fixation case, an individual fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, possibly aiming to supplant her entirely. Such occurrences, though rare, were documented in psychological literature. The perpetrator typically suffered a psychological rupture, fixating on a victim representing qualities they desired: stability, beauty, success, normalcy. The focus shifted when Rebecca mentioned a former colleague, Lily Winters, dismissed due to escalating erratic behaviors. Lily had closely collaborated with Rebecca, often remarking on their similarities. Post-dismissal, she sent Rebecca a series of disconcerting emails, one stating, "We could be one and the same. At times, I feel more like you than you do." Detective Shaw secured a warrant to search Lily's residence. The findings transitioned the case from perplexing to chilling. Within Lily's dwelling, a room had been transformed into a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's bedroom. The walls adorned with photos, countless images of Rebecca entering her abode, shopping, socializing, captured without her awareness. A closet harbored precise replicas of Rebecca's attire. Rebecca's preferred cosmetics sat on a vanity, accompanied by meticulous notes on her gestures, speech mannerisms, and daily routines. Particularly incriminating were the practice videos. Lily had documented herself mimicking Rebecca's gait, gestures, and expressions. The evolution was discernible: initial attempts clumsy and conspicuous, subsequent ones nearly indistinguishable from the authentic Rebecca. She aspired to be me, Rebecca murmured upon viewing the evidence. It wasn't mere imitation. She aimed to obliterate me. Forensic analysts uncovered sophisticated tools for replicating keys and duplicating electronic access cards. Lily had orchestrated an elaborate system to monitor Rebecca's movements, including a calendar with precise forecasts of her schedule. What remained enigmatic was Lily's ultimate objective. Journals discovered in her residence contained incoherent entries oscillating between first and third person, occasionally referring to Rebecca as me and her in the same passage. The conclusive journal entry sent a shiver down investigators' spines. Soon, only one of us will endure. The stronger version shall prevail. Upon authorities moved to apprehend Lily, she had vanished without a trace. Her residence bore signs of a sudden departure, drawers left ajar, certain electronics absent. A nationwide alert was disseminated. Rebecca was relocated to a secure refuge under continuous surveillance. For 3 weeks, every location associated with her former life underwent intense monitoring. Lily remained elusive. The case took a disconcerting twist when a security personnel at Rebecca's former workplace reported an anomaly. Despite being on leave, Rebecca had been sighted entering the building. Subsequent security footage verified the occurrence. A figure identical to Rebecca accessed the premises using a valid ID card, proceeded to her former workstation, and spent 40 minutes perusing her files before departing. Meanwhile, the actual Rebecca resided in seclusion at a safeguarded hideout, rendering her presence at the office implausible. The implications crystallized. Lily had not absconded, she had made her move. Assuming Rebecca's identity, she seamlessly integrated into her existence while the genuine Rebecca remained concealed. The case remains officially unresolved. Lily Winters eluded capture. Rebecca Thorne chose not to return to her former life, forging a new identity at an undisclosed locale. Detective Shaw retains a photograph on her desk, 2 women strikingly resembling each other. One is Rebecca Thorne. The other is Lily Winters. At times, she scrutinizes their countenances, seeking disparities, the nuances that would set one apart from the other. The most terrifying aspect Shaw often imparts to new detectives is not that someone can mirror your appearance or echo your voice. It is the fervor with which they seek to become you, erasing themselves in the process. Identity extends beyond mere presentation. It is a treasure we safeguard vigilantly, and sometimes its worth is only truly comprehended when threatened by theft. Story 22: The Enigmatic Disappearance. The cafe had been his sanctuary for years, a place of quiet reflection and solitude. Each morning he would slip into his usual seat, order his customary black coffee, and lose himself in thoughts unknown to anyone but himself. The barista recognized his face, a regular without a name, but one fateful day his presence vanished, leaving behind only a forgotten wallet. Detective Sarah Mercer delved into the mystery that unfolded within the confines of the coffee shop. The man, dubbed John Doe in the case records, was a specter captured on security footage. He entered, he sat, but he never departed. His disappearance defied all logic and reason, shrouding the cafe in an unsettling silence. As Mercer scrutinized the surveillance footage, she observed the ordinary routine of John Doe, his black coffee, his contemplative gazes out the window. And then, the inexplicable moment when he vanished into thin air, leaving behind a void in the fabric of reality. The wallet, a repository of enigmas, revealed no identity, only blank spaces where a name should have been. The contents hinted at a life lived in obscurity, a driver's license with no information, credit cards bearing no names, and a lone business card with a cryptic phone number. The notebook, filled with cryptic symbols and sketches of unfamiliar structures, baffled even the most seasoned code breakers. Mercer's investigation unraveled a tapestry of mysteries woven by a man who existed on the periphery of existence. Amidst the inexplicable occurrences, Mercer noticed a subtle anomaly in the security footage, a flicker in time whenever John Doe crossed the threshold of the cafe. Intrigued, she probed deeper, drawn to the antique mirror that hung between realms, its surface etched with arcane symbols mirroring those in John's notebook. The mirror, a portal to unknown dimensions, concealed a hidden chamber filled with identical wallets and a journal chronicling decades of experiments in temporal manipulation and identity transference. Each entry echoed a warning of encroaching danger and the imminent closure of a cosmic window. Witnesses spoke of eerie reflections and phantom sightings of John Doe, blurring the line between reality and illusion. The revelations led Mercer to an elderly physicist who unveiled the truth behind John Doe's existence, a brilliant mind lost in the corridors of parallel worlds and quantum mirrors. The cafe, a nexus of intersecting realities, stood atop the remnants of a research facility where Daniel Weston, the elusive physicist, had vanished into the unknown. Mercer's pursuit of the truth culminated in a revelation captured on shattered glass, a glimpse of two versions of the same man coexisting in fractured dimensions. With the mirror shattered and the enigma of John Doe unresolved, the cafe closed its doors. A chapter in a cosmic experiment concluded. Daniel Weston's fate remained a mystery, his presence lingering in the whispers of the wind. Mercer, haunted by the echoes of a reality beyond comprehension, found solace in her own reflections, forever entwined with the enigma of the man who didn't exist. Story 23. It arrived in the mail, wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address. A single brass key worn with time. The homeowner didn't recognize it, but something about it felt familiar. When she slid it into every lock she owned, nothing turned. It wasn't hers. But when she placed it on the coffee table, the old grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single, hollow chime despite having been broken for years. Sarah Miller reported the strange occurrence to authorities after finding the mysterious key. What seemed like an odd mishap soon unraveled into one of the most disturbing criminal investigations the quiet suburban neighborhood had ever witnessed. The responding officer initially dismissed her concerns. A key in the mail, perhaps a mistake, he suggested, but Sarah insisted something felt wrong. The officer reluctantly took the key as evidence, mostly to appease her, placing it in a small evidence bag that would later become central to a sprawling investigation. Detective Robert Harmon received the case file during the morning briefing. A veteran investigator with the Special Victims Unit, he had developed an intuition for cases that would evolve beyond their seemingly innocuous beginnings. The brass key sat on his desk, unremarkable yet somehow unsettling. Background checks revealed Sarah had no criminal history. A retired high school English teacher, widowed, with 2 adult children living across the country. Nothing suspicious in her financial records, phone logs, or social media. She appeared to be exactly what she claimed, an innocent recipient of something strange. The forensic team found no fingerprints on the key besides Sarah's. The envelope yielded nothing except a generic postmark from the regional distribution center. No DNA, no trace evidence. The key itself was a standard Schlage, available at any hardware store, though well worn and at least several years old. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique bidding pattern through the department database. A cold case from 7 years prior had documented an identical key pattern belonging to a storage unit where investigators had found blood-stained carpet, cutting tools, and photographs of unidentified women. The original investigation had stalled without sufficient evidence to identify a suspect. Harmon pulled the dusty case files. The detective who had worked the case had since retired. The storage unit had been rented under a false identity, paid in cash. Surveillance footage had long been overwritten. The evidence collected had yielded partial DNA samples, but no matches in any criminal database. The photographs recovered from the storage unit showed 5 different women, all appearing unconscious. Only 3 had been identified during the original investigation, all reported missing but never found. Their cases remained open, classified as suspected homicides without bodies. Sarah Miller recognized none of the women when shown the photographs. She grew increasingly anxious as the investigation proceeded, installing new locks and a security system in her home. The question lingered: why had someone sent her this key? Harmon ordered a fresh analysis of the original evidence using newer techniques. The partial DNA sample was expanded and run through genealogical databases. This yielded a distant familial match, a second cousin twice removed from the suspect. Working backward through family trees, investigators narrowed their focus to Harold Jenkins, who had lived 2 streets away from Sarah Miller until moving away approximately 6 years ago. His current whereabouts were unknown. Further investigation revealed Jenkins had been a substitute teacher at the same school where Sarah taught, though they had minimal documented interaction. His employment records showed scattered work history, long unexplained gaps, and frequent relocations. His former residence yielded nothing unusual upon inspection. Neighbors described him as quiet, unremarkable, someone who kept to himself, the common refrain that often follows revelations about predators hiding in plain sight. The big question remained unanswered: why send the key now? Why to Sarah Miller? Harmon theorized it might be a trophy, a warning, or perhaps a macabre invitation. The search for Jenkins intensified. His driver's license hadn't been renewed, no credit card activity, no tax returns. The digital breadcrumbs people typically leave behind were conspicuously absent, suggesting an intentional effort to remain untraceable. The true horror of the case emerged when authorities investigated a small cabin registered to Jenkins' deceased mother. Beneath the weathered wooden floorboards, investigators discovered a concealed room accessible only through a trapdoor. Inside, meticulously organized shelves held dozens of identical brass keys, each with a name and date engraved on a small attached tag. 5 keys corresponded to the women from the photographs. The remaining keys, 27 in total, presented a horrifying implication of additional victims previously unknown to authorities. Buried behind the cabin, forensic teams recovered human remains. The excavation continued for weeks as investigators unearthed multiple bodies in varying states of decomposition. Sarah received round-the-clock protection as the manhunt for Jenkins expanded nationwide. Behavioral analysts suggested the key represented a twisted invitation, Jenkins selecting Sarah as someone to appreciate his work. The press dubbed him the Keymaster, a name that spread rapidly across national headlines. Fear permeated the community as residents questioned how such horror had existed among them undetected. Detection dogs tracked a scent from the cabin into the surrounding wilderness. Search teams combed dense forest areas. Thermal imaging drones scanned terrain too dangerous for ground teams. The manhunt became one of the largest in regional history. A wildlife photographer hiking in remote woods captured an image of someone matching Jenkins' description. The grainy photograph showed a bearded man with hollow eyes carrying a backpack, heading deeper into the wilderness. Authorities closed in on the area, establishing a perimeter. Tactical teams navigated difficult terrain while psychological profilers predicted Jenkins would not surrender. They anticipated he might have prepared for this contingency with hidden supplies and escape routes. The final confrontation occurred when a patrol officer encountered Jenkins attempting to cross a river. Rather than surrender, Jenkins retreated to higher ground, where he barricaded himself in an abandoned fire observation tower. Negotiators attempted communication for hours without response. When tactical teams finally breached the tower, they found Jenkins dead from a self-inflicted wound. Beside his body lay a journal containing detailed accounts of his crimes, alongside a single brass key identical to the one Sarah had received. Inside a waterproof container, investigators discovered additional evidence, including photographs, maps marking burial locations, and personal effects taken from victims, a methodically preserved record of atrocities spanning nearly a decade. The journal's final entry addressed Sarah directly. "You never noticed me, but I noticed everything about you. The key opens nothing because what I wanted to give you cannot be unlocked with metal, only with recognition. Now everyone will remember my name." The subsequent investigation identified 32 victims in total. Families who had spent years wondering about missing loved ones finally received answers, though the closure came with the unbearable weight of confirmed tragedy. Sarah never returned to her home, unable to reconcile the horror that had brushed so close to her ordinary life. The grandfather clock that had mysteriously chimed was examined and found to contain a small wireless receiver. Jenkins had been watching, waiting for the moment she received his gift. The case remains one of the most disturbing examples of predatory behavior hiding beneath a veneer of normalcy. Psychological researchers continue studying Jenkins' writings, seeking insights to identify similar offenders before they act. And somewhere in an evidence locker, a collection of brass keys sits in silent testimony to lives cut short, each key opening nothing, yet unlocking a devastating truth about the darkness that sometimes hides behind unremarkable facades. Story 24. The parcel bore no label of return, no trace of tracking, just a weathered cardboard box faintly moist from the morning mist. It wasn't intended for her. Her address was correct, but the name was a mismatch. She ought to have disregarded it, should have left it untouched on the doorstep, but curiosity beckoned. She peeled away the tape, anticipating books, garments, something benign. Instead, nestled within was a VHS tape, accompanied by a solitary sticky note. "Watch alone." Sarah Miller gazed at the obsidian plastic rectangle cradled in her hands. Its weight felt off somehow heavier than expected, as if carrying the gravity of a forbidden secret. Her fingertips traced the frayed edges of the tape, sensing the minute flaws in the plastic shell. The handwritten note bore the imprint of urgency, each stroke etched with pressure. The suburban neighborhood hummed with its routine melody, a distant dog's bark, children's laughter beyond her fence, the drone of a lawnmower slicing through the morning tranquility. Everyday life flowed on, oblivious to the mysterious delivery. Sarah brought the package indoors, placing it on her kitchen counter as doubt crept into her thoughts. The name on the package, Daniel Whitaker, meant nothing to her. Having resided in the house for nearly 4 years, she had never received mail for anyone by that name. Curiosity and unease wrestled within her as she glanced at her nostalgic VCR. Something about the tape beckoned to her, a riddle wrapped in faded black plastic. Against her instincts, Sarah slid the tape into the machine. Initially, static danced on the screen, white noise that gradually sharpened into clarity. A dimly lit room materialized, illuminated by a lone lamp. The camera angle was askew, as if hastily positioned. A man occupied a wooden chair, his face initially shrouded in shadow. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," the man spoke, his voice soft yet resolute. "If you're watching this, someone has discovered you, which means they will find me as well." Leaning forward, he revealed a countenance marked by sleepless nights and perpetual vigilance, deep-set eyes, stubble of several days, disheveled hair. "I did not commit the crime. I need you to understand that. But they planted my fingerprints, my DNA, although I never laid a hand on her." As Daniel adjusted the camera, the room's sparseness came into view: bare walls, scant furnishings, the transient abode of someone prepared to flee at a moment's notice. "They set me up. The official report will claim I knew her, that we quarreled, that witnesses overheard our altercation. None of it is true. I encountered Catherine Walsh only upon seeing her face on the news." His voice quivered. "Deceased, murdered in her abode, and yet my DNA was pervasive at the crime scene." Detective Eliza Ramirez scrutinized the identical VHS tape on her desk, the fifth one to surface. 5 tapes, 5 disparate recipients, all conveying the same desperate plea from Daniel Whitaker, a man officially deemed the prime suspect in Catherine Walsh's murder, a man who had vanished without a trace upon her body's discovery. Initially, the Walsh case seemed straightforward. A young professional woman found strangled in her bedroom. No signs of forced entry, indications of a struggle. DNA evidence unequivocally pointing to Whitaker, whose fingerprints were already catalogued from a minor offense years earlier. Neighbors reported sightings of a man matching his description near her residence multiple times in the preceding weeks. Cell phone records placed him in the vicinity on the night of the crime. A closed case until the emergence of the tapes. "The tapes complicate matters," Detective Ramirez dictated into her recorder while updating her case files. "Whitaker is either orchestrating an intricate diversion or exposing something far more sinister." She surveyed her evidence board: portraits of Catherine Walsh beaming at a corporate event, crime scene photos too harrowing to linger on, maps delineating the delivery sites of the parcels, and at the center, Daniel Whitaker's driver's license photo. His gaze seemed beseeching. The investigation veered unexpectedly when Ramirez unearthed Catherine Walsh's involvement in a whistleblower case against her employer, PharmaCorp, a potent pharmaceutical entity with governmental ties. Walsh had unearthed irregularities in their clinical trial data, proof that they had concealed severe side effects in a new drug fast-tracked for release. She was set to testify, divulged a former colleague to Ramirez during an interview, casting furtive glances toward the door. Catherine possessed documents, evidence that executives were aware of the issues and buried them. The trial was slated for next week. The detective began noticing peculiar incongruities. The DNA evidence appeared almost too immaculate, discovered in locations incongruous with the crime's logic. Testimonies regarding Whitaker seemed rehearsed, with identical wording across various statements. Most disconcerting, surveillance footage from nearby structures inexplicably corrupted during the precise time frame surrounding the murder. 3 days following the tape, Sarah Miller received a second parcel. This one contained documents, clinical trial reports, internal communications, email transcripts, all from PharmaCorp, all bearing Catherine Walsh's digital signature, all substantiating her correctness. The investigation pivoted. Detective Ramirez liaised with recipients of the other tapes, assembling Whitaker's trail of breadcrumbs. He had served in IT security for a contractor servicing PharmaCorp systems. He had never encountered Catherine, but he had noticed her name flagged in an abnormal security protocol he was unauthorized to access. They were surveilling her, Whitaker expounded in a subsequent tape that surfaced. "I glimpsed the surveillance directives in the system. They knew she was amassing evidence. Then I found myself locked out of the network. The subsequent day she perished, and inexplicably I became the scapegoat." Breakthrough transpired when Sarah Miller discerned a detail on her copy of the tape that eluded others. A reflection in a window behind Whitaker disclosed a row of storage units. Collaborating with Detective Ramirez, they identified the locale. Within Unit 217, they unearthed everything. Daniel Whitaker's journal chronicling the conspiracy. Catherine's original files, and most incriminatingly detailed schemes to frame Whitaker, inscribed in the handwriting of PharmaCorp's chief of security, a former police detective with access to evidence protocols. Justice arrived not in a dramatic arrest, but through the gradual accumulation of irrefutable evidence. 3 executives faced indictment. The head of security confessed, securing a deal to testify against his superiors. The drug was withdrawn from consideration for market release. Daniel Whitaker emerged from seclusion, emaciated and altered by his fugitive existence. The charges against him were dismissed, yet the ordeal had etched him permanently. Sarah Miller encountered him once when he arrived to reclaim his tape. They conversed briefly on her porch, the very spot where his package had initially arrived. "Why me?" she inquired. "Why send it to my address?" He regarded her with weary eyes. "The algorithm selected you. I required individuals with no ties to me or Catherine, individuals they wouldn't monitor, individuals who might retain faith in their own discernment amidst accusations of my guilt." The erstwhile suspect and the inadvertent witness stood in silence, pondering the tenuous boundary dividing justice and manufactured deceit. Finally, Sarah spoke. The erroneous address turned out to be precisely the correct one. The VHS tapes were cataloged as evidence, tangible reminders that truth sometimes arrives in unforeseen packages, bearing unfamiliar names, awaiting a curious soul to unveil its secrets. Story 25. The realtor's listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints offered no clues to its existence. Yet when the family unraveled the old carpet, they stumbled upon a concealed door, a door with a rusted handle that required the strength of 3 to pry it ajar. As the door creaked open, a gust of musty air greeted them, heavy with the aroma of damp earth. Descending the steps into the darkness below, they anticipated storage space. Instead, they were met with a solitary chair bathed in the flickering light of a single bulb hanging above, and on the wall behind the chair, a collection of photographs, familiar faces staring back at them, images captured from within the confines of their own home. The Mercer family had settled into their new suburban abode amidst the bleakness of winter, when shadows enveloped the land early, and skeletal trees loomed against the frigid sky. The aging 2-story house, with its weathered facade and creaking floors, exuded a charm they had convinced themselves was steeped in character and history. Little did they realize the depth of history harbored within those walls, or the unsettling collision it would have with their present. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the property alongside her partner, the crime scene unit already cordoning off the area with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's voice had quivered over the phone as she recounted the chilling discovery beneath their living room floor. "We must document everything before anyone else descends," Connors instructed, donning latex gloves with practiced ease. Camera flashes pierced the darkness, capturing the eerie scene as the forensic team meticulously cataloged the basement's secrets. The aged wooden stairs groaned underfoot. The basement itself was compact, resembling a standard bedroom, its concrete walls painted a somber gray. A lone chair affixed to the floor at its center, while overhead, the stark bulb cast elongated shadows that danced across the walls, stirred by an unseen draft. Yet it was the array of photographs that demanded attention, 37 snapshots meticulously arranged in a timeline. "These date back nearly 4 weeks, noted Connor's partner, scrutinizing the timestamps on the photo backs. See this one, Mrs. Mercer napping on the couch, Mr. Mercer at the dining table, the children in their rooms. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of theft or vandalism. The security system had remained silent, seemingly unaware of the intrusions that had plagued the family's privacy. Forensic analysis unveiled a myriad of fingerprints scattered throughout the basement, many tracing back to previous owners of the property. A checkered history emerged, with the house changing hands 6 times in the past decade, each family departing within a year, selling at decreasing prices. None had breathed a word about a hidden basement. "We must interview every former owner," Connors directed, flipping through her notepad. The investigation delved into the property's murky past, unearthing discrepancies in records and perplexing alterations to blueprints. The breakthrough arrived during an interview with the contractor who had renovated the house 7 years prior. His complexion blanched upon glimpsing photos of the basement. There was no such room, he asserted, his hands quivering. "I stripped that place down to the bones. There was no basement, no door, just earth and concrete beneath the living room." Extracting data from a concealed memory card within the light fixture, digital forensics unveiled a trove of images capturing not only the Mercers but a procession of previous families. Children dreaming, parents bickering, mundane routines frozen in time. The unseen observer had meticulously documented their lives. A chilling turn transpired when audio recordings surfaced from a weatherproof box clandestinely buried in the basement. Conversations from the master bedroom, the kitchen, the living room captured with surgical precision. Despite an exhaustive search, no hidden microphones were recovered. "We must scour every inch," Connors urged, tension tinging her voice. "Inspect air vents, light fixtures, outlets. The perpetrator has been spying on these families for years." Beyond the photograph wall, investigators stumbled upon a concealed passage leading to a monitoring station, complete with a desk, chair, laptop linked to wireless cameras, and a journal brimming with eerie observations on each family that had dwelled within the house. The journal's script mirrored that of Edward Kelvin, the property's original builder, an enigmatic figure who had purportedly perished during the house's construction, a detail clouded in suspicion as the inquiry unfolded. The final entries teetered on the edge of madness, with phrases like "they never look below" and "they never acknowledge me" recurring obsessively. The chilling prophecy, "the next family arrives tomorrow," haunted the closing pages. Fingerprint analyses confirmed the investigators' chilling theory. Edward Kelvin had never vacated the house he had erected. Instead, he had retreated into the clandestine recesses he had fashioned, crafting a labyrinth of surveillance points from which to observe the unwitting families. A 3-day manhunt culminated in the discovery of Kelvin nestled within a crawlspace amid the second-floor bedrooms, his wiry frame accustomed to navigating the hidden passages he had woven into the walls. His eyes, unaccustomed to the harsh light, blinked back at his captors. During interrogation, Kelvin painted the families as mere players in his private drama, subjects under his detached scrutiny. He professed to have never infringed upon their lives physically, never pilfered from them, merely observed, recorded. "They welcomed me in," he murmured to the investigators, his tone eerily placid. "They signed the deeds, they became mine." Diagnostic assessments unveiled Kelvin's profound delusions, wherein he deemed himself the custodian of the house rather than an interloper. The families, in his distorted reality, were transient inhabitants in what he viewed as his eternal domain. The Mercer family never returned to the property, joining the ranks of former occupants who had hastily abandoned their possessions, clutching only what fit within suitcases. The house stood silent as legal proceedings unfolded. The trial laid bare the extent of Kelvin's surveillance apparatus, a house engineered as a voyeuristic apparatus, its denizens unwitting participants in his meticulous documentation. As the jury delivered its verdict, Kelvin remained impassive, already ensconced within the recesses of his mind, where he roamed the spectral corridors of a house that existed now solely in memory. Ultimately, the property was razed, its foundations exhumed and filled. But for those families, the violation endured. They lingered in the shadows of their new abodes, casting wary glances at air vents, light fixtures, and the junctures where walls met ceilings. Were they truly solitary now? Had they ever been? In the hush of night, they pondered these questions, haunted by the unseen presence that had monitored their most intimate moments, shattering the illusion of sanctuary within the walls they had trusted to shield them. Story 26. In the quiet neighborhood, a house stood silent and untouched for years. Whispers among the neighbors spoke of a young woman who had vanished, leaving the dwelling in solitude. When new tenants finally crossed the threshold, they encountered a locked bedroom, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. With effort, they breached the barrier, stepping into a realm frozen in time. The air hung heavy with neglect, dust dancing in the dim light. Yet amidst the stillness, a peculiar orderliness prevailed. The bed neatly made, the mirror devoid of smudges. A lone candle stood spent, its wax a pool of forgotten tears. Upon the desk, a notebook lay open, its pages a canvas of a lost soul's final words. Detective Morgan, a seeker of truths, pored over the script while technicians combed the room for elusive fingerprints. The inked script belonged to Elise Winters, a name etched in the annals of a haunting mystery. Her elegant penmanship narrated a tale of shadows and whispers, leading to that fateful night of vanishing. "I know he's watching me tonight," the ink confessed, a plea for understanding in the face of impending darkness. The detective, consumed by the enigma, secured the notebook as evidence, a relic of a life interrupted. A lingering scent of dust mingled with an elusive chemical essence, wrapping the room in a shroud of secrets. The landlord, a specter of guilt, lingered in the doorway, haunted by the revelation of a forgotten room. Elise, a paralegal entwined in a web of corporate deceit, had uncovered truths that demanded silence. Her meticulous nature, a shield against the encroaching shadows, had led her down a path fraught with danger. A world of numbers and deception unfolded, painting a portrait of a woman on the brink of revelation. The bedroom, a sanctuary turned into a chamber of echoes, held no answers in its silent embrace. No traces of chaos, no crimson stains of violence, just a frozen tableau, a silent witness to a life interrupted. The candle, a sentinel of forgotten whispers, bore witness to secrets buried deep within its waxen heart. Forensic explorations unearthed hidden truths, a key to a vault of shadows. A flash drive, a key to a box of revelations locked away. Documents and recordings spoke of a truth too dark to be ignored, a conspiracy woven in whispers and deceit. The echoes of justice reverberated through the hollow chambers of power, the threads of deception unraveled, exposing a tapestry of corruption. Elise's legacy, a beacon of truth in the night of shadows, guided the hand of justice towards those who sought to silence her. The room, a testament to a life cut short, harbored the echoes of a battle fought in silence. The mystery of the locked door, a gateway to revelations hidden in plain sight. In the shadows of the night, justice found its mark, a reckoning for those who thought themselves untouchable. The house, a silent witness to a tale of darkness and light, stood as a monument to a soul lost but never forgotten. The whispers of the night carried the echoes of a woman's bravery, a testament to the power of truth in the face of deception. and as the stars danced in the night sky, the house stood as a silent sentinel, a guardian of secrets long buried but now brought to light. Story 27. The gentle current whispered its lullaby that quiet morning, painting the water's surface in a serene stillness. The fisherman's gaze drifted lazily until a peculiar sight caught his eye, a solitary suitcase bobbing near the tranquil shore. Initially dismissing it as discarded rags, he felt a shiver crawl down his spine as he drew closer, the pungent odor hitting him like a wave, thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. The case, bound in chains with rusted edges, held a haunting mystery within its confines. When authorities pried it open, it wasn't garments they uncovered, but a macabre tableau. Long locks of hair, fingers frozen in a silent grip, and at the bottom, a chilling note, "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer stood at the somber scene, her delicate handkerchief pressed against her nose, absorbing the eerie atmosphere. The victim, a woman in her 30s with dark tresses and pallid skin now marked by the water's touch, lay before them. The meticulous medical examiner meticulously catalogued every detail before the body was tenderly taken away. It wasn't the method of disposal that struck Mercer, but the unsettling precision in how the victim was presented: manicured nails, freshly styled hair, clad in opulent attire. Identified as Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent specializing in high-end properties, she lived a solitary life in an affluent neighborhood, divorced with no offspring. Colleagues painted a picture of a determined, detail-oriented professional, known for her ambition and discretion. Her disappearance, reported by her assistant after missing a crucial showing, sent ripples of concern through those who knew her. She wouldn't miss it, her assistant insisted, emphasizing the significance of the potentially lucrative deal. As investigators delved into Walsh's meticulously ordered modernist abode, a peculiar sense of perfection enveloped them. Every corner gleamed with precision, designer furniture arranged flawlessly, and not a speck of dust dared mar the surfaces. The fridge held neatly arranged meals labeled by day, the closet a rainbow of meticulously arranged clothing. It was in her home office, however, that a crack in the facade appeared, a slightly open drawer revealing a leather-bound journal. The final entry spoke of a haunting presence. "He's watching again. Same car, different plates." Diving into Walsh's digital footprint uncovered a web of mystery unknown emails echoing the unsettling phrase, "I see your perfection," sent consistently at the same time each day. Her online searches hinted at a growing unease, a quest for security measures and personal protection devices. Mercer, piecing together the puzzle, shared her insight with her partner, an intricate pattern of obsession and meticulous planning. The breakthrough emerged unexpectedly from a local pawn shop, where Walsh's distinctive emerald necklace surfaced, missing from her belongings. The pawned item led to Michael Linden, an unassuming maintenance worker with a habit of haunting Walsh's building under the radar. Surveillance footage painted a damning picture of Linden's surreptitious visits, his quiet demeanor belying a sinister obsession. A search of Linden's humble abode unveiled a chilling reality, walls adorned with photos of Walsh and other women, each sharing similarities in appearance, all captured without their knowledge. Some faces were cruelly crossed out with red ink, marking them as targets. Walsh stood as the third victim in Linden's twisted gallery. Behind a concealed panel in his closet, a shrine emerged, a meticulous arrangement of personal items belonging to each victim, a sinister catalog of their lives meticulously documented. The interrogation room turned icy as Linden was brought in, his demeanor unyielding despite the mounting evidence against him. a facade of normalcy shattered to reveal a mind warped by perceived imperfections in others. They were flawed, he admitted, his voice devoid of emotion. Their supposed perfection was a mask. Catherine's inconsistencies were glaring to me. Her flawless facade was a facade. The hunt for the first two victims hinted at in Lyndon's cryptic note led investigators to remote locations, where two more suitcases surfaced, each cradling a woman bearing a resemblance to Walsh, both real estate agents who projected an aura of infallible precision. As Lyndon faced trial, his impassive presence belied the horrors he had orchestrated. Stalking his victims meticulously, he sought to fix what he deemed as imperfections, meticulously grooming them before extinguishing their lives. Families of the victims sat in silence as the judge sentenced Lyndon to life without the possibility of freedom. For Detective Mercer, the case closed officially, but a shadow lingered, a question of what inner turmoil drove Lyndon to his atrocities, what fractured mirror he sought to mend through his twisted acts. The river, unperturbed, carried on its timeless journey, washing away traces of the tragedy. Yet on Mercer's desk, chilling reminders lingered in the form of those haunting notebooks, a testament to the darkness that can lurk beneath the veneer of ordinary lives. In the stillness of the precinct, unseen predators waited, their eyes peeled for a solitary flaw to expose the facade of perfection.